Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. It's super awesome to see you all for part two of this live PM case study, where we will be investigating together as a team how do we increase the average order value for, say, a company like BlinkIt or Instamart or Zepto who operate in the quick commerce space. For context, this is part two. So in part one, as a team, we had already covered trying to understand what is the nature of the problem, how did this problem come into being, how do we go about structuring the problem, how do we identify if AOV is the right lever, and then going on to digging deeper to understand is there any merit and are there any insights which can help us reframe the problem statement. And we had a brief glimpse into how might we think about this problem strategically and then move to the solution space, right? For the purpose of today's conversation, I will do a small rush through of the first part of the conversation so that it becomes easier to move into part
Aparna, you
two.
mind adding?
A humble request to everyone on the call as well. Please do keep your microphones on mute. It would be unfair to the other participants who are trying to actively participate, listen, and engage. So if you are actively doing something else, it's unfair. I mean, I can't stop you from doing that.
Uh,
But if you are paying attention, just do keep your microphone muted so that it is beneficial for the other participants. Second, when the flow is interrupted, it does become difficult for me to, make a coherent narrative as well. So please, 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 humble request, please do keep your microphones on mute. And if I do notice anyone who is not, I will proactively mute too as well. So don't take any offense for that as well. Alrighty, great. With that, we will get started. Let me now start sharing my screen. Before that, one last perspective. I've been doing this now for about a couple of sessions. I've been trying various formats. One where I just present the entire end to end and then open up the floor for questions. The second format was what I tried the last time around, where I present each segment and then participants could then ask questions. What I've realized having conversations with everyone is while the latter does seem engaging for some, for the vast majority, it tends to throw people off course from the narrative. So, what we will do in the greater interest of most of the participants is allow me to present the narrative as to how I think about this problem statement, how am I running through some questions in my head, how am I structuring the problem statement, how am I going from one point to the other. Wherever you have doubt at every stage of this narrative, please keep a note of it. What we definitely will do is at the end of the conversation, I will open up the floor for questions. Feel free to take screenshots any point of time if it helps you to keep track of the discussion, take notes, etc. But we will answer questions at the end of this session. That way, the flow is not disrupted and those who want to actively participate in the Q&A can stay back. And those of you who felt that, hey, it's good enough that I've attended the entire session, I have enough clarity and I don't need to be part of, they can drop us. So that way, we're optimizing for everyone. No single individual gets to, take up the entire space. Sometimes what happens is the questions become very passionate and then we just end up discussing one particular question for a very long period of time. While that singular participant gets a lot of value, the other participants start to lose engagement. So I'm trying to make sure that I do justice to everyone present. So we'll see how this edition turns out as well. Happy to take feedback at the end of you from this session. Cool. Now that the ground rules have been set, let me now share my screen. I see Akshay having raised his hand. So before maybe I get started, Akshay, maybe I'll answer your question and then we'll start.
Hi, hi, Deepak. Thanks. So this is not a question. I attended the entire 4 hours session last Saturday.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that the process that you followed, I can't recollect that clearly, because it was a lot of things done. So my request would be, if a flow chart kind of a view, if you could help us, that first we did this, then we did this, then we did this. It really helps me square things in my mind. I couldn't clearly picture the flow after a long session. That is the issue.
Understood. Understood. That's why I have recorded this session as well. It's available on YouTube. If you have
Yeah.
not come across it, just do me a favor. Just ping me on LinkedIn and I'll share the video with you. You'll have the entire
No,
deck.
I have the video, but the point is, in a very long session, it kind of gets difficult to get it.
Got it. Got it. Let me see if I can try to bring in a little more effective narrative and structure during the course of the conversation today. And I'll take your feedback at the end of today's session as well. All right? Does that sound good?
No. I'm sorry, but I'll take one more minute. The problem is not with the flow at all. It is just that in a longer session, I missed out on understanding a few things in between. So just revising the flow once again, kind of a flow chart view. First this, then this, then this. That
All right.
would
Okay.
help
What
at
we
the
will
end of
do
the
is,
session.
since you have a very specific request, let me see if I can connect with you offline separately
Sure.
to understand what you mean. Because in this
Sure.
one, I probably may not be able to understand what you mean versus what my gaps are. I'm not saying I'm the best in class in terms of giving an instruction or sharing a narrative. So these are areas for me to improve as well. But I don't, at this point of time, necessarily understand the gap from which you're coming. So allow me to connect with you offline. Post this
Great. Thank you.
discussion. Also in the best interest of everyone else as well. Otherwise, we may end up, overspilling on this and missing out on the fact there are about 77 odd participants who are eagerly excited to get the case study started. All right?
Sure. Thanks.
All righty. Fantastic. All righty. Great. So what we'll do again is we will start off by just probably spending about 15 minutes quickly going through the entire narrative from the very beginning so that it acts as a quick refresher for everyone on the call. And it gives context as to why we're going into part two. Just to be clear, part two today, we'll be talking about, given the learnings that we have had in terms of structuring the problem statement, giving the learnings that we had in terms of deriving the insights, from those, how are we formulating a strategy? What are the components of such a strategy? What are then the solutions that emerge for each of these pillars? How do we then prioritize between those initiatives? How do we then formulate a roadmap? And then perhaps most importantly, since there are a lot of very early career PMs who are in the APM to SPM range, as well as senior leaders who really want to get their craft sharp in terms of product definition and delivery, we'll be focusing a lot of time into picking one particular feature and trying to get into the depths of detail as to how do you think about solutioning, how do you structure a good solution, what are its components, how do you evaluate it, what are some critical elements that need to be thought through from a solution lens so that the final feature that goes off is of high quality and is capable of delivering impact. And most importantly, as a PM, you're capable of mitigating risks that come in the way of delivering value, right? So with that, we will get started with the first part, which is the brush through, and then we will get into the second half, right? So the premise started with us asking the question as a team, how do we go about increasing the average order value, right? The first question I tend to ask in this is, who is the originator of the problem? The reason why we typically tend to ask these kind of questions is to understand that, is it a consumer problem? Is there another stakeholder's lens whom we should view it from? Is it a business problem? More often than not, because the narrative has always been that we are PMs and we need to be consumer-centric, we try to preemptively frame every problem as a consumer problem and not see the true origination, understand the motives for solving such a problem. In this case, the problem of AOV stems from business. And the prime reason why the business is trying to focus on AOV as the lever is there's this overall narrative of increasing profitability. Now, the question comes, hey, what are the levers for profitability? Ultimately, it boils down to how much revenue you generate and the costs that come out of it. And the delta between that results in your profitability. The question then becomes, why does profitability become important now? The reason being the cost of capital we saw was exponentially increasing. Therefore, companies are, or rather investors are looking at more capital efficient companies which are capable of generating their own cash flows, which can invest back and gives them the confidence that, yes, they can grow sustainably for longer periods of time with lesser amount of capital, right? With that narrative put in place, the question was to come, where does AOV fit in to the grand scheme? How does it connect to revenue? How does it connect to profitability? So for that, we drew a KPI tree, which helped us understand under earnings, how does revenue fit in? under revenue, where does the concept of gross order value come in? And under gross order value, how does the concept of average order value come in? To give you a quick summary of this, the TLDR is when you increase average order value, what you're trying to do is actually increasing revenue. And by increasing revenue, while other team members are focusing on how to reduce cost, one team is focusing on increasing revenue, the other team is focusing on reducing cost. Thereby, you're increasing your margins and therefore profit. So average order value leads towards revenue, increase in revenue, while someone else is focusing on cost, helps in increasing your profitability, right? The question that emerged for us that why are we trying to solve for average order value? Is that really the best lever, given that revenue is the biggest lever that is trying to be moved to create that profitability lens? So from that angle, we were trying to explore various other levers. So you have commissions, you have delivery fees, you have ads, marketplace commission rates, number of orders. You have all of these variables that can also help move the revenue as a metric. So we then wanted to evaluate what are the various thought process that we can use to measure whether or not revenue is the right function, and also if average order value is probably one of the better metrics. So we checked in terms of how sensitive is the metric to change, is there any positive or negative second order effects, and by how much can we really change it, and is there a way in which we have framed this problem statement itself which limits the extent to which it is sensitive or it has a headroom for change. So these were some of the open questions that we started with. We then evaluated each of these metrics on a few of these parameters. And we then wanted to say, okay, if we want to really understand AOV of the metric, how do we evaluate it from a trends point of view and see if there are any patterns to understanding sensitivity behind these metrics and its headroom for change. What we did was we then pulled out Zomato's annual report and we looked at its trend over a couple of quarters to see how did revenue change, how did that result in take rates improving, how did that reflect in terms of orders and AOV. What we noticed was that number of orders, which is fairly logical and intuitive if you think about it backwards, is probably one of the strongest levers available. Whereas if you look at AOV as a metric, did not constitute to that much of a dramatic improvement in revenue. While it contributed maybe about 15-17% improvement, it was not a powerful enough lever. So the question then became, well, if it doesn't have so much sensitivity, why then should we still look at it? Is it because we have not framed the problem right? Or is it that we have tried the best that we could and it is still the maximum that can be juiced out of it? So from that lens, we decided that we should probably do a deep dive just to get a sense of confidence, say that have we really done the right things or have we really juiced out on what we can with respect to AOV. So from there, we dug in deeper to understand what is the nature of AOV, right? So we then broke it down and said AOV is a function of the number of items multiplied with average items. And that gives you what's called the AOV. So we wanted to then understand why or how does this influence a customer in terms of the number of items that they buy, and also what are the factors that influence the price of items bought in an order. So we dug one level deeper into understanding average order value. So for that, the very first question that we asked, and a recap of this is, typically when we try to attack these kind of problems, most teams narrowly focus on saying that why does AOV happen the way it does, and not take a step back to understand the overall consumer behavior to say what triggers those kind of purchases. So we typically end up asking, why did you add 2 items to your basket? If there was discount, would you buy more? So you focus on the features that have been done and use that as a lens to evaluate the success and failure of AOV, and also AOV is a problem statement. But instead, what we should really be doing is understanding consumer behavior, right? So for that purpose, we started asking ourselves the 5 whys. From there, we dug in a little deeper to understand, okay, what are the buying behaviors for each of the categories? So if you take BlinkIt as a company, there are many categories. You have groceries. Within grocery, you have fruits and vegetables, atas, the staples. Then you have snacks and drinks. You have beauty and personal care, etc. So our goal was to then say, how do we go about understanding the behavior? Like, why do people buy the way they do for each of these categories? And how does then a service or product such as BlinkIt fit into this entire narrative? So from that lens, we listed down all the categories, and we had a broad set of thematic questions that we want to understand. triggers for purchase, frequencies of purchase, quantity of purchase, place of purchase, factors for purchase, right? And we theoretically, or rather in real life, what you would actually be doing is for each of these categories, do a very, very comprehensive customer study, trying to understand across categories what are these behaviors. But for the sake of this discussion, to make it effective and also just to use it as examples of how to think about it, we narrowly focused on only groceries and snacks and drinks as a category, right? We then talked about the various types of methodologies that you use to interpret customer behavior. You speak to customers, you do data analysis, you do secondary research. You also have personal observations as to how, as a PM, you look at the world and what are some observations you made. And in many cases, there are times that there is really no data and it harms you, doesn't harm you at all, actually, but just doing a quick experiment to prove or disprove a hypothesis and learn a little more about the market. So we explored about each of these techniques, and we then mapped and said, okay, which of these techniques could we use for each of these questions? And then for the sake of this particular case study, because I didn't have the time to sit and do a lot of customer reviews, nor do we have as a team the data to dig in deeper, we said, for a moment, assume that the secondary research is all we have and is equivalent to a good primary research. What kind of insights can we gain? So we collected a bunch of customer insights from a blog which does a lot of really good customer reviews. It's run by Dharmesh Bhai. You should check it out at some point of time. And we went through all of their web items. And what we did was we first tried to categorize customers based on their behaviors, and then try to see insights that came out of it. So for us, the key learnings the first time around was we saw that there were two broad types of customers. One were, modern couples who lived together as a group, had probably a small kid or so, and they had a very interesting set of behaviors. And then the second population was digital children who lived along with their analog parents, wherein the mother was the primary gatekeeper of all things food and household, whereas the child had the freedom to decide what they would like to do when it came to the snacking behavior. And therefore, you saw certain patterns from that. So we then went about summarizing the key insights that came out of grocery and snack and drinks behavior for all of these customers across all of these questions. What were the triggers, the frequencies, the quantities, the places they purchase, and the factors that influence them to purchase? What came out across interesting for us was, while there's a large set of sub-cohorts, one interesting sub-cohort was a sub-cohort represented by a personality called as Anita, who has shifted her grocery buying behavior dramatically to buying it on a daily basis from Instamart. So if you look at most of the customers, they were buying it, especially perishables as a category, right? They were buying it twice weekly, be it from Instamart or from Amazon or Big Basket or Kirana stores or Zepto. And staples were purchased usually from large format stores where you can get bulk and discounts, or from your neighborhood Kirana stores. But this sub-cohort was rather interesting because it gave us the opportunity to say that, why is this cohort behaving differently? Because the positioning in the market for a company such as BlinkIt or Instamart, it's the last minute app. And that's what we see typically. Whenever someone forgets an item or there is a shortage when they're cooking, they resort to using Instamart or BlinkIt or a Zepto to buy up, say, some paneer or some onions or some tomatoes at the last minute so that they can continue their cooking or top up that which is missing, right? What Anita instead has switched her behavior to saying that if such a capability exists, how about I go about buying vegetables or fruits on a daily basis? Because it gives me the freedom to decide every single day what kind of food I would like. I don't have to sit and pre-plan. Now, this is an interesting behavior because we see the similar mental models emerging from the world of food ordering as well. Prior to Swiggy or Zomato, we used to go to restaurants once in a while, but now that restaurants are accessible at one click, we have become spoiled for choice and we're craving for taste, and therefore taste and variety becomes the new order of dimension in which customers are making their thought process. And they're saying, hey, why should I be eating the same boring food every single day? And second, planning food out for long periods of time is really boring. I would like to plan in the moment and say, this morning, I feel like eating Indian. Next morning, you wake up and you're like, hey, I feel like eating Chinese. So what kind of vegetables should I order to make Chinese? I probably think that I want to eat gobi Manchurian today for lunch or dinner. I can ask my cook to make for it. So you're now making the world bend to your will in real time, basis the fact that such a capability exists. But why is Anita exhibiting this behavior? Why aren't the rest? So that was the bigger question that we started asking ourselves. And therefore, could we do as a company to start shifting these mindsets? So that was one of the key takeaways that we had, right? The other interesting behavior that we noticed was younger populations typically default to snacking as their primary use case for reaching out to an Instamart. So be it chilling with friends, or they're bored, or they're emotional, they want to binge on some snack. They're like, hey, I want a pack of chips. Let me get it on Instamart. I want to get a soda. Let me get it on Instamart. So you have this new behavior where binge snacking has become super convenient, and this is not gated by the adult in the family. These kids are earning their own money, they have their own freedom. So they decide that, hey, this part of my eating habits is fully in my control, and I choose to therefore order what I want, when I want, how I want it, right? So we then got a sense to say that, okay, there is a strong positioning problem as well, because most people think we're a last minute app, but the capability is not necessarily that it can only fulfill last minute, it can extend to other use cases as well. But there are gaps which we need to solve for to get to that point of view. So summarizing, what we learned from this was there are cohorts like Anita, where grocery buying has been shifted to a daily habit instead of a weekly or a bi-weekly habit. The digital children love to use an app like BlinkIt for snacking and beverage purposes. We also see them across cohorts, perishables as a category. The default buying behavior is purchasing anywhere between once per week to twice per week. The reason for that is they want freshness or quality, because this is things that can get spoiled very easily. Even though you have a refrigerator, you still want to buy these items really quickly, consume them, so that they don't spoil and therefore you don't consume bad food, right? Staples, on the other hand, because they have longer shelf lives and you can therefore store them, people tend to buy them in bulk, and therefore the purchase frequency is once per month. And these are usually large number of items at certain prices, which give higher AOVs as well. So the next question that we should ideally then be asking as a company is to say that, well, we now understand how do consumers behave. Now, this is the part that we couldn't cover the last time, so we're going to dig a little deeper into in this part, which is part 2. We have understood how consumers behave and what is their mental models toward purchasing these categories. Now the question is, how have we solved for it and how have others solved for it? So this gives us a sense of understanding as to, are we seeing the complete picture? Are we on par with the market in terms of the understanding? Do we have the right set of features which is competitive in the market? Or are we lagging in the market? Are we leading in the market? So that's the second order of evaluation that we need to do. Now, the exercise that I typically do before trying to just jump into evaluating apps or products is trying to put a structure of where should I even be looking at. So for this case, I was trying to say that, okay, ultimately we're trying to look at cases where there could be items which are purchased and you could get them to buy more items. What are such categories? We first look into the grocery world, and then we try to understand the online versus offline behavior. And within online, is there a difference between quick commerce and e-commerce? And then in the non-grocery categories as well, are there other categories where people buy large number of items, and is there an inspiration that we can take for that? So for that, we said, how about we look at fashion, food, travel, transportation, etc. Now, not all of this resulted in anything meaningful, so I'm only going to present those from which we can see any learnings from. So the first thing was we need to evaluate BlinkIt in itself. So I started by looking at the app and saying, okay, what are the various constructs that are readily available which help in improving AOV as a metric? So on the homepage, you see that there is a free Coke can being offered if you purchase more than $2.99. You also get free delivery if it's ordered above 99. So you see a construct such as a basket builder where for various basket sizes, you're given various incentives. So that's the abstraction that we take. And you see it representing itself in two formats. There is an ad-like format, and then there is like a gamification which shows a sense of progress. which allows you to know how far you have filled up your basket to avail that offer. The second construct that I noticed in BlinkIt was bundles, where let's say you want to buy a potato. There are pre-built bundle sizes. So, for example, you can buy 1 kilo potatoes, you can buy a 2 kilo potato, you can also buy 3 kilos of potato, and you can choose between. The third and interesting area was once you added this item to your cart, you also got suggestions saying, hey, people also bought. So there's also a lot of cross-sell recommendation happening here at this point of time, saying, because you bought potatoes, people who bought potatoes also bought cauliflowers or also bought tomatoes or also bought onions. So in case these were items that you were thinking of, you didn't know that you had to buy, but then you saw them and said, oh yeah, I actually need it, because people aren't necessarily very good at maintaining lists. This could probably act as a means to cross-sell products and help in building baskets as well. We then look at other such bundles. So if you go into the category page, you notice there are pre-made bundles saying, hey, there's a combo of ginger and cucumbers and coriander, etc. So one reason why this bundle could exist is most people typically, when they do their grocery purchase, probably see these as staple perishables that you add as part of everyday purchase because they have high frequency usage. For example, something like cucumber is part of probably every salad that you eat before you eat. Ginger is like a default item that is used for most cooking. Coriander, likewise. Lemon probably is used for seasoning in a lot of food. So these items then become as good combo packs. It helps in increasing the average ticket size. You could be probably doing a top up of these items individually. For example, I may have forgotten ginger, therefore I tend to buy that separately. I may have forgotten maybe lemon, and therefore buy it separately. But by clubbing it together, you help in reducing the number of those orders, increasing your AOV, and helping fulfill the customer's need as well. You also see that when you add an item to your cart, you get another cross-sell recommendation. And very importantly, if you notice also how your search page was listed, you see a lot of price anchoring happening as well. For example, if you search for cauliflower as a vegetable, you see the first item presented as cauliflower. The next item is a slightly more premium product, which is organic cauliflower, which is priced 6 rupees more. So for someone who's looking at cauliflower, and let's say I did not know BlinkIt had organic cauliflower, or I suddenly started falling into the organic movement and like, yes, I really want to buy organic products. Placing it next to it makes me say that, well, regular cauliflower versus organic cauliflower is just 6 rupees more. So why not as well switch to it? The next price anchoring is seen with a convenience factor. You could buy cauliflower and get it home, clean it up and chop it. Or someone says, I've done that job for you as well. And for that value-added service, I'm going to give it to you at a slightly higher price for smaller quantities. So now, if I had to buy the same cauliflower, I probably am going to be spending 106 rupees to get 400 grams worth of that cauliflower because it's chopped. It makes my life easier, but it's a great way of driving premiumization through price anchoring. So by placing similar but premium products in the same viewport of the app, you're nudging people to think about alternatives. So these are interesting ways in which BlinkIt has been doing increasing of items per order, as well as doing some form of premiumization to increase the item selling price. You also see an interesting phenomenon called as contextual bundles. So for example, when you search for tomatoes, you see that tomatoes, onions, and potatoes have been bundled together and being sold as a unit. So probably some insight said that people who buy tomatoes typically also buy onions and potatoes. So how about we club them together and create a combo so that the user doesn't have to add these items independently. We'll take the LCM of the most common quantities required and make them as a combo package. And to give them a sense that they're saving money as well and make it more desirable, we can give them a discount. So you see that it's typically 194 rupees. It's probably now priced at 149. So it seems like a great steal and an effortless getting 3 items for the instead of 1 item. Lastly, on the checkout page, every time you add an item, you also see that before you check out, there are items being suggested. And you also see the gamification of that free can of Coke or free delivery continuing to say that, hey, in case your basket is not meeting the threshold, how about you continue adding items so that you make up for the remaining amount and get this free item. And that way we also help in reducing our costs. So this is what BlinkIt does. We did a similar exercise across Instamart as well. We did a similar exercise across Amazon to see how they've done it. And we did a similar exercise across Myntra as well. And we also looked at some international apps, such as, say, Walmart, to see if there's anything different that they did. What we noticed as a function of this exercise was basket builders, bundles, and cross-sell seem to be done at parity across all companies. So for BlinkIt as a company, we can safely conclude that we are on par when it comes to the key levers that are traditionally used for increasing AOV, such as basket builders, bundles, and cross-selling. Now, it's not enough that we do customer research and we do competitor research. Grocery purchasing as a category has been in existence for many, many decades, right from the time it incepted itself as a small kirana store near your house. And there's been a lot of rich learnings that have gone through the retail industry over these decades, which we can capitalize on. So we don't have to always reinvent the wheel. Sometimes there are a lot of insights which are already out there, proven as concepts, just that we don't know because we're thinking this as quick commerce. But quick commerce is the layer of convenience added to grocery. So it's not that we are inventing grocery purchasing as a category, we're inventing convenience within grocery as a category. But the first principles of grocery still hold true. And one of the key learnings, both from international markets as well as from the Indian markets, suggests that impulse purchase buying is one of the largest contributors of sales. So an Indian study says that almost 50% of grocery purchase is done on impulsiveness. In global markets, it seems up to 62% of sales can be influenced by grocery buying. And in some categories, it may be one of the largest drivers of revenue. Now, therefore, the learning for us is impulse purchase does contribute towards revenue. The question is, with this insight, how do we think about this problem statement? Now, some of you may ask, what is impulse purchase? It is the act of not going into the store with the intention of buying that particular object, but once you have a look at that object, the desire quotient for it dramatically shoots up, and you decide then and there to add to your cart and purchase. Prime examples of that are, you can see this in today's retail formats as well. Whenever you go to a traditional retail outlet or even your modern trade, at your checkout counter, you'll always see it stacked with chocolates, candies, and a lot of tasty things. And by default, you'd be like, hey, I'm checking out, this chocolate looks really interesting. I'm therefore going to buy it. The reason this psychology works really well is whenever you see ads for food items, etc., it hits our limbic system, and we're primarily not too evolved from a caveman. While we may be wearing a shirt, we may be wearing a laptop, our inner wirings for food cravings remain fundamentally the same, which is why anytime you smell something tasty, you feel hungry, right? Anytime you see something tasty, you feel hungry. So when you see these kind of amazingly tasty food, especially categories of products that you've purchased in the past, for example, if you have purchased a Twix in the past, or you've purchased, say, a Cadbury Silk in the past, and it has given you joy, it has given you pleasure, and you know it's tasty, the next time you look at it, even though you are not hungry, even though you're not emotional, you will have the tendency to pick it up and buy it. That is the psychological principle that is being tapped into to make these kind of impulse purchases work. So now that we know this truth, the question is, have we truly leveraged this during the entire course of our customer shopping journey? And if not, how do we go about doing it? So that's the second insight that comes out through secondary research, but historical research. Now, given all of these factors, we now want to understand, where does BlinkIt fit into all of these categories, right? So we saw that the primary triggers for purchase have been forgetting to top up or buying snacks, and they're doing replenishments. This, again, we're just trying to visualize the structure of the buying behavior of perishables and trying to understand where are we strong and where are we weak. We see that under the forgetting and top up, either perishables can be done or staples can be purchased, and it happens when the need occurs. Likewise, snacks can happen, or snacks are purchased typically when they are planned for, or mostly when it's impulse. And when the impulse triggers, it can happen at the store or it can happen at home. And then replenishments is the other format in which this category is purchased, wherein perishables are purchased daily, twice weekly or weekly, and staples typically tend to be purchased on a monthly basis. Now, again, summarizing from this, when do people tend to buy and how much do they buy? We know that perishables, when they're purchased, or staples when they're purchased, or snacks when they're purchased impulsively, tend to have low AOVs, whereas planned purchases as well as replenishments for perishables and staples tend to have high AOVs, right? In this context, we're then trying to ask the question, where does our monthly transacting user base distribution fit, right? So usually the activity that we do for this is we look at the entire population and see what percentage of transacting users fall into each of these categories. So we know that most of our customers today fall into the forgetting slash top up based buying behavior and snacking as a buying behavior, whereas replenishment as a category is where we have very low presence. We see early signs in the form of Anita, but we still haven't won that market position yet. So from that lens, we're trying to reframe this and say, okay, where is BlinkIt, Zepto slash Instamart, where are we strong and weak? We know that we are strong in the topping up category. We know that we're strong in the snacking category. But where the markets are very large and we are very weak is in the perishables category and in the staples category. So which then makes us ask the question, given all of these insights, what should we do next? Right? So we started with the problem statement saying, hey, how do we increase average order value? With these insights that we have gathered thus far, how should we reframe our problem space? So just so that I break a little bit of the monotony, I'm going to probably open the floor for maybe 1 minute of questions or rather perspectives. I'd like for maybe one or two of you to share your perspective saying, given all that you've seen thus far as insights and learnings, our goal was to increase AOV. How should we be thinking about this problem statement going forward? Is the question to you as a team. Anyone would like to take a stab at it? You could either write it out on chat or you can just simply raise your hand and share with me your perspective. All right, Akshay, what's your point of view?
Yeah, so now we know what is selling on our platform and why. The question now should be, should we double down on what is selling and get it to get purchased on other segments, or focus on what is not selling and try to get people who are already there to purchase that?
Got it. Got it. Okay. I'm also going to be reading out what people are saying in chat. Radhika is saying we should be increasing more assortment so that there are basket builders. Ashwin is saying, how do we increase AOV while capturing higher wallet share from perishables as a category? Sarat is saying we should try to increase impulse purchases by improving SKU images, making it more attractive. Rashmi is saying, how do we focus on our strengths and increase our AOV? That means double down on impulse. All right. I'll take one more, maybe Kirtan, if you can just quickly share your point of view, and then I'll share how I think about this.
Oh, sure. So I had this idea, maybe we can focus on every insight that we have in different parts of the user journey. Maybe in the beginning, when they're coming, we can focus on the perishables where, the average order value is going to increase highly. And maybe towards the end, just like how we have in the retail stores, we can focus on the snacks and the small parts. So that's one thing I had in mind. And the other thing is the timing. So maybe during the mornings and afternoons when the cooking is going to be high at home, we can focus on these things. And maybe in the evenings or late nights, we can focus on the snacks part. Pushing them forward.
Got it. Beautiful. All right. All interesting perspectives. Now, let me share how I've structured the thought process behind how I go to the next step. So the first activity that I want to do is redefining the problem space. So the initial goal was say, how do we increase AOV? Now I'm breaking it down into 3 subset of questions. How do we increase AOV when perishables are topped up? How do we increase AOV when staples are topped up? And how do we increase AOV when snacks are purchased on impulse? Because these are the three broad customer buying behaviors which bring them to our platform. Each of this may or may not have conjoined solutions or very distinctly different solutions. So I'm going to start by trying to answer these questions, right? A more important question is to say that, well, there is the way in which we operate today, but we also notice that we have a small population of customers who have already exhibited the behavior of drastically changing their buying behavior from weekly to even twice weekly to daily, which means there is an opportunity to chase that. So, how do we then shift the mental models of our MTU, the entire population of people who buy products on our category every month, to purchasing perishables and staple, more so in the direction of daily, if not at least twice daily, right? What are the key insights that, sorry, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Right. So we're now trying to map it back to the insight that we looked at as well. What is the insight supporting the increase of AOV when perishables are topped up? We already know that in the perishables case and the staples case, AOV in its current format is already on par. So we need to do what we need to ask ourselves, what should we then do? If we are increasing AOV when snacks impulsive purchase, we know the insights are snacks contribute a large portion of grocery purchase. And when our goal is to shift our MTU, we know that there's a cohort like Anita who's already habituated. So from these insights, we then start asking a set of strategic questions, right? To say, okay, if perishables is the pathway and people are habituated to topping up as of now, and we are currently at a state where our current AOV drivers are best in class, the strategic question then becomes, is there a way by which we may innovate on new constructs that help in increasing either the number of items purchased by user or increasing the price of items that are being purchased? Likewise, for staples, we know that they're already in the pathway of topping up, and we are already using best-in-class AOV constructs to drive. The strategic question then becomes, okay, if that's the case, how else can we innovate further down? So we already do this. How can we double down on this? The third component is we know that snacks contribute or snacks are impulsively purchased. Knowing this insight, how might we leverage impulse purchase of snacks to increase AOV? This becomes our third strategic question. The fourth strategic question becomes, if there exists a cohort like Anita, how do we then shift our MTU to purchasing perishables and staples? What is the thought process behind it? How do we structure this problem? How do we attack this problem statement? All right. Now, the first question that, before we go into the solution space, the last part, the shifting of the MTU to perishable staples, is a larger strategic question. It is not a product problem, it's a business problem. It's trying to say that we exist in a category, we've got weak market share there. What are the essential questions that we need to ask in order so that we have the right to win in that category? So typically, these are company level questions, not product level questions. Usually, your category leaders, your product leaders, your marketing leaders, your operations leaders, your finance leaders all come together and ask the question, why do we think this is an attractive segment to go after? Does this play to our strengths? What are the weaknesses behind it? And what can we do to win? How do we differentiate ourselves and what can we do to really, really win, right? So with that lens, I thought, let me try to answer a couple of evaluation levers from a product lens, right? For us, if we have to evaluate between perishables and staples to know which of this is the right set of categories, is it either or one of them? The four levers upon which the entire quick commerce equation wears down is one, your dark store. How does your dark store infrastructure facilitate moving into perishables and staples? How does your warehouse facilitate it? How does your delivery personnel enable moving into perishables and staples? And is there a pricing advantage? Because ultimately our goal is to increase revenue, and the second order benefit is increasing contribution margin. So is there any insights that we have here that we can capitalize, which helps justifying or helping us lean towards a particular category or maybe even pick up both? So with that lens, I shared a couple of perspectives as to why and why not a particular category, which is perishables or staples. So when it comes to perishables, dark stores can facilitate moving very well into the perishables category if we were to take a just-in-time model. If you were to notice, most of the grocery purchases, especially for dailies, would happen first thing in the morning, which means you have a very, very streamlined supply chain to say, hey, I have my warehouse for the catchment area that I'm servicing. I'm bringing the right spread of vegetables in terms of selection and depth to my dark store. And from there, I'm distributing it. Because you are not holding inventory for long, you are not going to be forced to have very large dark stores. So your constraining factor in terms of expanding into the scope of perishables is your dark store capacity. How many items can you store in terms of selection and the depth that you can store? Because you can streamline your supply chain for certain time windows, you can make it just in time, therefore making it almost like a pipeline all the way from warehouse to your customers, where the dark store acts as a storing position. Yes, Vivency, I see your hand raised.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. Actually, I'm sure that you have answered the question, but my doubt was when you said that now we should frame a question, and someone asked a doubt which was a very thoughtful question, and I had the same doubt that should we move on to perishable or staples, or should we move on to where our average order value is already high? So why didn't we move? Why we move to perishable and staples rather than increasing that that hero purchase that we already had?
Great. So if you notice, that's what I mentioned in the previous question. We are not negating any of these insights. So we already have a scenario where, sorry, let me go back to this case. People come to BlinkIt to do their top-ups. They do top-ups for perishables as well as your staples, right? The current mechanism that we utilize to increasing AOV in these scenarios is constructs such as basket builders, constructs such as cross-sell, constructs such as price anchoring, etc. So these are ready-made tools available in the current workflow for most of our customers, right? So the strategic question is, say, we have done good, we are equivalent in terms of everybody else. What more can we do from a strategy point forward in terms of product feature capability point of view? Likewise, we already know that people are doing impulse purchases. Can we leverage that and go deeper and identify newer product techniques to make snacking impulse purchase happen a lot more effectively? The third is a strategic business opportunity to say that perishables and staples contribute to an incredibly large pie when it comes to revenue. So if you were to look at planned versus unplanned, impulse purchases versus planned, etc., most of your grocery purchases and your larger market resides in the perishable staples in the planned purchase domain. Because we have positioned ourselves in this domain, we are only being able to capture a smaller portion. So we can either be the king of a pond or the king of a lake. We now have the opportunity to move from the pond into the lake, but that requires certain rethinking of our strategies. Because this is not specifically a feature level solve, it requires a strategic thinking from a company lens. We are choosing to evaluate that first. It's not to say we will not be evaluating the other initiatives. We are starting off by evaluating the most complex and gnarly of the problems, which is a strategic company level choice. Should we change our positioning from last minute to convenient fresh? How do we make this mental model shift happen? What are the first principles behind it? Can we not do it? What are the constraints? So for those reasons, we're starting with the largest strategic question and then moving to the other set of strategic questions. Does that help clarify, Vivency?
Yes, very well. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So in that context, we're attacking the largest strategic question, right? So we had identified, again, to summarize, that dark stores can facilitate, provided we streamline our supply chain to a great extent. Staples, however, have a limiting factor because you're only be going to ordering once a month. And for the catchment area that you have to serve, your selection as well as depth may far exceed your current dark store infrastructural capabilities. So that may be a limiting factor. Warehouses on either ends are elastic in nature. They are at the outskirts of the city. You can expand their capacity. There's a lot of spare capacity available right now. So it's not a limiting factor. Now, when it comes to delivery personnel, perishables, usually the number of items that we've seen, even for say someone like Anita, turns out to be about say 7 to 10 items. It's something very safely that a delivery person can carry. Whereas if you look at staples, most people tend to order large quantities. They're very heavy in nature, and more often than not, the current infrastructure, be it the individual or the vehicle that is being used to transport, becomes a constraint, which means you need to rethink of your last mile supply chain, which is an order of magnitude of a structural shift in terms of business. It is not to say we cannot. The question is, should we do it now? And when should we do it? Lastly, when it comes to perishables as a category, an interesting insight here is that MRP as a construct is only available for packaged goods, not for vegetables, not for loose items, which means that, say, a cauliflower, which typically is sold for, say, 35 rupees in your Kirana store, could be sold for as high as 80 rupees because there's no rule or law regulating it. And we can say we are selling it for 80 rupees because all the convenience that I'm baking into it. So as a business, we have a lot of upside in terms of how we can price it. Now, that said, we still need to be competitive with respect to the market, but we can still have the flexibility to increase the price a lot more than how much we are able to procure it from the supplier. So we may be able to procure it from the market very cheap, as well as price it very high, which gives you a huge margin. So which means from a wide variety of factors, perishables seem to be a far more lucrative, attractive category to move into as opposed to staples at this point of time. From a structural standpoint, from a margin standpoint, and from the ease of moving in, we also know that we already have an existing cohort like Anita who's exhibiting this behavior. So there is proof in the pudding that this customer behavior can be modified, and our existing capabilities to a reasonable extent is capable of servicing it, but it is not sufficient. We need to solve for it more effectively, but we have the right ingredients in place to move into perishables as a category. So with that, we are now formulating our strategic pillars for increasing AOV. Vivensi, I hope this will now help give you a clearer picture. We are not focusing only a set of items. We're saying that we have all of these opportunities to chase, and we're picking the top 3 that make sense to us. 1, how do we innovate on AOV constructs for top-ups? How do we leverage snacking impulse and introduce that at various points in the customer's journey or make it even top of mind for the customer? And how do we make our MTU grow into a daily, weekly, perishable purchase behavior? And therefore, given these set of strategic initiatives, what are the key set of product capabilities, features that we should be building together as a team to helping increasing AOV through these methodologies? So one is to say, with existing behavior, you can do a set of add-ons, but the primary limiting reason as to why AOV, no matter what you do, cannot explain is the mental model with which people come to the platform is for top-ups, and you have to shift that to a daily, weekly purchase cycle so that the category behavior in itself enables for higher AOVs because people tend to buy large number of items. So with that, we will move to the solution space. Now, one other data point that you could use to build your justifications to why you could move into, say, perishables is you can see, let's say, external data. So if you look at, say, DMart's annual report, which is publicly available, you can see the contribution coming in from groceries, dairies, etc. And if you were to do probably one level deeper click, you'll probably see that within this category in itself, groceries and fresh produce probably contribute about 50%, and staples and packaged food contribute another 50%. So all of these factors also help you build conviction to say why you should be going after perishables as a category. Right. Now that we have identified these strategic pillars, we now want to move into the solution space. So the first question is, how do we innovate on AOV as a construct? Now, as you would have noticed, whenever I attack a problem space question, I typically tend to use this concept such as logical trees to say, how do I deconstruct the problem statement into smaller and smaller logical tracks under which I can go a few levels deeper to ideate. So we already know that AOV as a construct is a function of 2 things. making customers buy more items per order, and making customers buy more premium items. Now, the question then becomes, what are some techniques that can be utilized for it? So we've already seen that basket building is a capability available. We've seen that bundling works. We see that cross-sell works. Now, the question that I ask myself is, well, all of these exist. What can I do to make this 10x better? Are there opportunities? So, for example, today, if you open up BlinkIt and you see the offer to increase the basket size, historically, I've noticed that the free Coke can has been given as a default. Now, the question then comes to me as a product person is, well, Coke may work for some people. Will it work for everyone? What if there are different categories of products which can be used to drive this behavior? For example, what happens if I gave chips as a problem, as a basket driver? What if the reward was maybe another drink? What if it was probably biscuits? What if for someone who's health conscious, the idea of Coke doesn't make sense, but maybe they may like something like coconut water? So you have all of these customers who may like certain types of rewards and may not like certain types of rewards. So Coke may have worked for a certain population as a V0, but for the next iteration, can we think of personalization as a problem statement? So that then seemed like an interesting opportunity because nobody seemed to have done it. And maybe if they did, they probably did it manually, which means a category manager or a business manager has been given the configuration capability, say, okay, for week 1, run Coke as an offer. For week 2, run, say, Lay's as an offer, which means that you have to continuously sit and figure out what is the best offer, etc. But given that we use technology to solve problems, what can a machine understand better than a human, quicker, faster, and more efficiently, and therefore identify the right categories and then identify the workflows necessary at the back end to make this work at scale for a large population of customers. So that was the thought behind personalized offers. Likewise, discounting. Not everybody requires a 50 rupee offer. Maybe somebody is very happy with the 10 rupee offer. So which means there's a lot of money left on the table, which could be otherwise better distributed as well. So can these offers be personalized? Now, again, these are observations I have made. It is not to say that this might have not been solved. So in the interest of, let's say, when you do an interview case study, try as best to see what is the trend for a product or for a particular solution for a period of time to build that conviction, say, yeah, this seems like the gap in the market and therefore it's an opportunity. For me, for the limited time that I observed, I felt that these are opportunities for personalization. Now, coming to bundles, today you see that there are a lot of bundles being created manually. The question then becomes, are there larger set of bundles that can be created? So, for example, tomatoes, onions are one type of bundles. What are other types of bundles that you can create? Could it be at a recipe level? Could it be at any other nuance which helps in customers saying, hey, rather than just buying a tomato, how about I buy A, B, C, D put together, and that's available at various touch points? It could be at the home page, it could be the list page, it could be at the cart page as well. Now, cross-sell in itself, again, it works on a certain algorithm. And this typically happens when, let's say, you add an item to cart, there is a set of suggestions being provided. Likewise, at the cart page in itself, there are a set of suggestions being provided. Is this really the best in class? Could there be better algorithms that are developed, which improves the efficiency? So these were some of the questions. When it comes to buying premium items, one of the questions that I was also asking myself is, well, we have done price anchoring, but there are probably nuances that go behind why people buy premium objects, and that is social proof. So could we dig in a little deeper to understand what kind of social proofing can I give? For example, let's say I live in a particular residential complex and I'm used to buying, let's say, regular milk, regular cauliflower, etc. And I start telling you that, well, people in your neighborhood have started switching over to organic. Now, I associate myself with the community saying that, well, I'm very similar to them in terms of, say, status, in terms of income, in terms of behavior. But this behavior of mine, wherein I don't buy organic, seems to be an outlier behavior. Everybody seems to have shifted to organic. What if I also shift to organic? So these kind of social nudges could help. And this could be represented in various ways. Trending in your area, X number of people bought this recently, etc. The other is to say that maybe I'm influenced by a certain type of individual. For example, I may be following, say, an actress such as Samantha, and I've been noticing that she's eating healthy, and she's being saying off left that, hey, ever since I switched to organic food, I've seen that my health is better, and therefore you probably have something as organic food endorsed by Samantha. Now, these are just wild ideas that they're throwing out there. The goal of this exercise is try to really, really push the boundaries of what kind of ideas that you can come up with. You're not throwing in the constraint of tech. You're not throwing in the constraints of budget. You're not throwing in the constraints of people. You're not throwing in constraints in terms of time to market. You're just trying to think exhaustively of all possible potential levers that could be used to push. And are there learnings that are coming in from other walks of life, be it from your industry, outside the industry, learnings that you have in terms of human behavior that you can use to think, how can I shape this behavior on the platform for the particular goal that I'm chasing? So these were some of the ideas that I thought of when it comes to increasing AOV. Now, when it comes to increasing impulse purchase in snacks and beverages, again, the way I tried to structure this problem statement was to say, well, when does this trigger occur and where can it occur? So when does this trigger occur? Impulse purchases, like if you to think from a very first principles point of view, either the trigger could be external, and that external trigger could be a visual that you see. For example, I see the picture of, say, cake. I might be tempted to have a cake. I see an ad for, say, a burger. I may be tempted to eat a burger. I see ad for, say, Coca-Cola. I'd be like, oh, well, it's hot. Let me get myself a can of Coke right now, right? Or you may be on Facebook or on Instagram and you could see a certain influencer talk about, hey, have you tried out this whole truth bar that's come out? It's this really tasty bar. It's super yummy, made out of dates, no sugar, etc. And I'll be like, wow, it looks good. The person seems to make it taste good. How about I add this to my cart? So that could be a reason as well. Or there could be activities that you do and you have a preset number of products that you typically consume when these events happen. For example, when you're Netflixing, you may be habituated to eating popcorn and drinking a can of Coke. When you're studying, you probably say, hey, I want to munch on some healthy snacks. So, for example, let me get some buckner or let me get some popcorn. Or when you're chilling with friends, you're like, all right, let me get some candies, some popcorn, some Coke, let me get some chocolates, etc. Right? So there are a lot of these external factors which trigger my impulse to purchasing these items as well. You didn't think that you'd want to do it, but at that instant of time, you're like, whoa, I really need it because I need it and I'm going to feel happy doing it. It could also happen for internal reasons. For example, you're sad. For example, you've just come back from a hard day at work. Your boss has been, shouting at you. The traffic was terrible. You come back and you feel incredibly frustrated and you're like, I really need something nice to eat at this point of time. And therefore, I want to eat ice cream. And you come home and you open up BlinkIt and you're like, let me get an ice cream right now. Or women, for example, when they're going through periods, they're like, hey, really feeling bad at this point of time. I need some chocolates. Or like me, sometimes you're just utterly bored and you have nothing to do. And you're like, well, nothing great on Netflix, nothing to do right now. How about I order some popcorn and it gives me some joy, right? So all of these psychological triggers, social triggers, can make an individual want to think about buying such a product, right? Where can you then bring this to the customer's attention? Well, when it's happening off platform, you can reach out to them via notification. In the event that they're on your platform, you can communicate something on the home page, list page, cart page, etc. So this is how I was thinking about, okay, where does this happen? When does this happen? I still don't have a solution yet, but this helps me to start putting some structure to an otherwise very abstract concept, rather than me just saying, how about I think of 10 random ideas and I'm not able to coherently think of how these ideas come together, nor am I able to explain coherently to anyone listening, how did I come up with these ideas, nor do I have a mechanism to go 2, 3, 4 levels deeper to come up with more such ideas. So putting a structure like this gives you some pathway to go broad and deep. Once I did this exercise, the next thing I did was to say, okay, is there another way of visualizing to see if there are any opportunities that I might be missing? So the same thing that you saw in a tree format, I made it into a flow chart wherein I said, okay, as a customer, I could be coming to the app for a top-up purchase, in which case I open up the app. I can then go to the home page. At this point, maybe you can start priming my impulse purchase decisions by showing some content related to snacks, which maybe start thinking me about, well, I'm buying cauliflowers and someone showed this picture of fresh new mango ice cream that's coming in and it's summer, so maybe I should start considering. So you're starting to prime the customer on the homepage as well. You could do that on the search page as well. So I go to the search page, I search for maybe mangoes, and then you start saying fresh mangoes, and then you could say, well, if you're searching for mangoes, why do you not consider, say, mango lassi or mango ice cream, etc.? So is that a way in which you can introduce into that journey? So this is during the course of your typical top-up purchase. Now, it could also happen that the customer is not coming for a top-up purchase and they have a trigger, like the ones that I mentioned, right? You have a social trigger or an emotional trigger. And you could either open the app or you don't. If you don't open the app, I could possibly send you a notification saying, hey, you've just come back from work. Are you stressed? Here are some options for you. Or I've built that mental model, and therefore I could choose to open the app, and I get a sense as to why you're opening the app, when you're opening the app, and start thinking of contextual ways in which I could bring snacking as a primary reason for you to continue that journey. So it helps me identify a couple of things. When could I introduce it? Give me some early thought process around how I could think about ideas around it, and where could I introduce those ideas. With that, it gives me a lot more clarity in terms of how I can structure some of these ideas. So if you think about impulse then as a behavior, it happens due to two reasons. One, how do you visually represent that product, or how do you show it to that user, making it desirable? That which you cannot see, smell, etc., you cannot drive desire. So how do I make snacks more desirable? And if you think about it, there are a couple of ways. You can use images, you can use videos, you can use text, all to amplify the desire behind a particular product. Now, had it been traditional offline retail, you could have gone down to think, well, how about smell? How about any other format such as audio, etc.? But in the digital world, we are limited to these mediums by which you can communicate desire to a customer. The second is, okay, now that I'm able to communicate, how do I suggest this to the user? Right? So one is, how do I represent this desire? The other is, how do I suggest this desire? So we know that typically we could do recommendations. We can also see that there have been psychological concepts such as nudges, which is to say that when people are in certain parts of the journey, you can subtly highlight why they should consider a product, and those then become attract. We've also seen that bundles have worked historically. One such example is if you perhaps open up, say, a BlinkIt or an Instamart or a Zepto during cricket days, you have predefined cricket bundles. For example, you have a snack bundle, you have a beverage bundle, or you have a snack and beverage bundle. So you have a Lay's plus Coke, or a Lay's or a biscuit and Coke. So you have these predefined bundles which make it very easy for a customer to say, hey, I'm a chips and a Coke kind of guy, so I'm going to get that, add that to my cart, move on, right? Because I know that typically when I watch a cricket match, I have that predefined bundle. So are there such preemptive bundles that we can create? So a Netflix and chill bundle, a tea time bundle, a study time bundle. And could you probably make this recurrent to make the friction a lot more lower? For example, I'm going to Netflix and chill every single day. So how about I set up a Netflix and chill bundle so that every evening at 7 p.m. I come back from work and there's this amazing snack box waiting for me to just consume. Now, again, the goal is to think wild, crazy, think out of the box ideas, think of every possible permutation, combination. The goal is not to kill ideas right now, but to foster ideas and to see how many ideas you can grow from here, right? Now comes the harder problem statement, which is to say, how do I shift the MTU to daily purchase of perishables? Now, the broadest breakdown of this problem statement is to say, because this is a category level problem statement, there is a demand side problem statement as well as a supply side problem statement. So the question then comes, okay, how do we think about structuring solutions for demand, right? So the first thing that we do is by starting to map the customer journey. So let's say a typical customer comes to your app. They usually come for a top-up journey. They open up the app. This is the current nuance in which they're coming in. So till date, most of our customers haven't shifted yet to the larger behavior. They're coming in to do their top-ups. So I've forgotten to buy tomatoes and I'm making some food and I run out of tomatoes, so I need it at that point of time. Or you plan to make something in the morning and then you realize you don't have it. So for all of these reasons, you decide to open up the app. You go to the homepage, you either search or you go to the category page. You then go from the search page to either the search result page or you go to the list page. From there, you can usually directly add the item to cart, or you decide to go to the product page and then add the item to cart. From there, you move on to the cart page, purchase page, order tracking page, and finally the order delivered status page, right? Now the question then comes for us, well, in this current journey, how do we change the positioning of last minute to ordering perishables on a daily basis? And how do we create a habit change? So if you recall, most of our customers have explicitly said to us, well, our mental model for BlinkIt is it's a last minute app. So how do you change that perception? And given this flow, how do we do it? Second, it is this flow which constitutes majority of the customer's behavior. So how does behavior change happen in the context of this user flow? So these are the two opening questions that I have. So at this moment of time, I'm not even jumping into solutioning. I'm just trying to put a structure to figure out where are opportunities and what are essential questions that I need to ask. And given these questions and this flow, how am I identifying opportunities and therefore meaningful solutions? So the first question I want to attack is, how do we change the positioning of last minute ordering of perishables? Right now, it's top up. I want to shift it to saying people should order on a daily to weekly basis, right? In that context, the first question that I then have to ask is, well, how do I communicate this? And the second question that you want to ask then is, what is the value proposition that you communicate? And the third is, where are opportunities for me to communicate it? So in this case, given that the user is coming to do their top-up journey, usually more often than not, you would notice that anytime a new category launch happens, you have some real estate readily available for marketing purposes. These are very generic marketing messages, right? So there's a cricket match going on, you talk about cricket. Father's Day is going on, you talk about Father's Day as a context, right? So you have real estate that's really available, which could be used to communicate this value proposition, right? The second question is, okay, how do we communicate it and what goes into it? Now, what are other opportunities? Now, as a PM, you could say, hey, how about I introduce this into the search page or the search results page? Now, the counter argument to that is to say that you don't want to disturb the customer when they're deep into the flow. If they're in the top of journey, you don't want to distract them from them. You want them to complete that task efficiently, right? So if you were to take that efficient task path flow mental model, you would not want to do any activity which distracts them from that. So you'd want them to continue in that search journey. You'd want them to continue their category journey. Finally, till they add their cart, they go to the cart page, finally finish their purchase. And on the order tracking page is now a beautiful opportunity because most orders, let's say weighted average, takes about anywhere between 6 minutes to maybe even 15 minutes. So you have about 6 to 15 minutes of attention time that you could use to sell this story effectively. Today, that real estate is being used for doing ads. It's being sold other promos. There are maybe some gamification constructs that are being done at this point in time. Given your strategic priority, you could use some of those real estates to tell the story, saying, hey, we are now saying that BlinkIt is not just a last minute app. You can use this for buying your groceries on an everyday basis. What should I communicate for it, right? So we know that customers have said to us that what they really value is freshness and some indication of quality. So how do you then bring in those nuances into all of these touch points on the homepage and the order tracking page? You could do this as well on the order confirmation page, or rather the order delivered status page, to say that, hey, it's been delivered, just letting you FYI again, we are capable of doing this, letting you know, here are people who are doing it. This is proof in the pudding. So that helps changing the mindset of how a customer thinks about the positioning. You will be doing more about this, ads on social media, ads on television as well. This is what you can do on the product front to solve for this. The next question is, okay, if we have attacked and solved the problem of communicating this value proposition, how do we then make it super easy for a customer to add items into the daily, weekly, twice weekly list? And how do we remind them about this? Because once I've got awareness, as a product team, our goal is to simplify the effort that someone has to put into solving this problem. So then, what are the activities that the user has to do? What does that current journey look like? And is there better ways of doing it? And second, to shape behavior, we know that you need to keep reminding customers over and over again. So how do we bring in that reminder mechanism? So with these kind of questions in place, I now have a slightly better structure of thinking about the solution phase. To say that if I was to solve for daily purchase of perishables, on the demand side, the first thing I need to solve for is awareness. The second large thing that I need to solve for is habit formation. In awareness, there are a wide variety of capabilities I already have or I may need to build. So I could do homepage ads, I could do order tracking page ads, I can do order confirmation page ads, etc. And any other real estate that I think could be used effectively to solve for awareness. On the habit formation side, we know that the structure of habit consists of three components: motivation, ability, or the action, and the triggers. So we can then say, okay, what are the various ways in which I could send triggers or notifications or communications to shape this behavior? Could I send out manual reminders? Could I send out time-based reminders? Could I send out personalized reminders, which are very contextual to users' behavior? All of these are potential possibilities. Likewise, when it comes to action, you have the customer who is going to enter into buying groceries or perishables for the very, very first time. So what does the first time entry action journey look like? And then if the user is going to return back, how do they do it? Now, within that in itself, there comes an interesting set of questions. What happens if the user who's on the platform already has a large data set available? Does that make the journey easier? For example, I've been doing a lot of top-ups and I've been doing across a wide range of categories. I've been buying cauliflower, tomatoes, onions as regular top-ups. So I have some sense of who Deepak is and maybe all kinds of vegetables that he buys. So which gives me some confidence to say, okay, you know what? I have enough data about this individual so that he doesn't have to think about entering each of these items. I can say that this is typically what you could buy. The question then becomes, what happens when you don't have such a large top-up list or the spread looks very poor? Could we go about asking for it? Is there a way in which maybe I get a sense of what kind of recipes this person consumes and then try to figure out what kind of items are required for it? Then the question comes, okay, if this customer has done it once, how do I make it one click? You would have seen this in Instamart, for example, that once you have placed order for a couple of items, your app opens up by saying these are your frequently ordered items. They've gone to the extent to say that now frequently ordered items is a vertical category in itself, wherein after Instamart, after Explore, after Swiggy, food delivery, you have reorders, which tends to show that most people tend to order the same thing over and over again, which means you need to think about how to make reordering super simple and make that as a default choice, right? Lastly, you know that the reason why people are buying fresh vegetables, be it offline, online, is they're looking for quality, freshness, because they don't want to buy one tomato that is spoiled, or they don't want to buy one onion which comes from being spoiled, etc. So you want to show trust markers for this. Now, there's an interesting question that is coming from Pavitra. How about offering 10% of credit coins from other for the order so that they can purchase? Now, this is a good thought process. Now, one reason why I consciously choose to remove rewards is you want the core value proposition to drive home behavior before you make customers get used to discounting. One of the bad things that we typically do is the easiest thing to make customer shift behavior is saying, let me give deep discounts. The problem then is you're spending a lot of money. People are missing out on the fact that convenience, freshness is the real value proposition, right? I anyway have to eat food on a daily basis. I anyway go out to buy food on a weekly basis. Why not as well make it happen easier on my platform? So the motivation is already high. If you're trying to shift people's behavior for things that I otherwise don't do, giving rewards makes sense. If there are reasons to say that, I can't trust this person directly because I don't have any other trust component apart from them trying out the product, then it makes sense. But these customers have been buying fruits and vegetables from us, right? So the trust factor already exists. It's just a case of saying that our supply chain is now super geared up for buying fresh vegetables on a regular basis, and therefore you don't need any of these other incentives. Now, it's not to say that it will work. We don't want to preemptively start by throwing money at that problem statement, right? One of you has also suggested that, hey, how about we do subscriptions? You could explore subscriptions, but we already have seen that customers are habituated to buying a certain types of vegetables basis their need. So what subscriptions could do is it removes the flexibility. Now, again, this is an interesting product philosophy, for a lack of better words, right? Subscription works well for certain very standard categories. For example, milk. you will want to buy one type of toned milk and that's it. You could do a variety of things with that toned milk. You can make coffee with it, you can make paneer with it, you can make milkshakes with it. But when it comes to your daily ingredients, what you really want to sell the story of is convenience, flexibility of eating food. For example, today I wake up to eat. I say that, Kal, I had Italian food. Today I want to eat Chinese food. The minute you go down a subscription model, maybe you're limiting that flexibility and freedom by saying, no, you're ordering onions and you have to eat onions, or you've ordered this baby corn and you have to eat baby corn. It's not to say subscription may not work for a certain cohort, but we want to first start by attacking that flexibility, that freedom of variety that customers can choose. And we have the supply chain that is already well geared for it. So, certain categories wherein you are going to consume the same product day in and day out, subscriptions may work. But if the larger construct is variety and convenience of food that you want to eat, and that largely boils down to the recipe and the cuisine that you want to eat, subscriptions may not be the best solve. And for that reason, I have consciously avoided bringing in subscription as a concept because of the mental model that we want to sell to the customers. At some point, we will probably identify a set of customers where there is repeat necessities of certain items. For example, staples or perishables such as tomatoes, onions, cucumbers, maybe something that people buy on a daily basis, or milk. You could make those as subscription products. So we still want to build enough data conviction as well to see what are repeat. And once we see those data models, we could probably then build subscription. Otherwise, preemptively building, we may end up over-engineering a solution without knowing if that is the right solve with the model that we have at this point of time. Naveen Raj is saying large number of people repetitively order same products. This is in a spectrum, right? Now, so in a week or a month, I may be ordering a certain set of products, but for a given day, I may be ordering differently. So if you go to your Instamart as well, it shows all of those items. But within those, I have the freedom to choose what would I like. So instead of having 200 items that I have to wade through, I'm now going through 50 items that I have to select. And of the 50, there are only 10 that I need today. So I have narrowed down my subset that I have to choose from. So which makes the process of reselection easier. So you have a superset, but from that superset, you're having a smaller subset that is relevant today. If I make those 50 ordered on a daily basis, I may not need it. So this is the largest spectrum of things I most likely order. But for today, I choose to order M out of N such items. And hence, for those reasons, you want to give customers that flexibility. So I hope that helps answer the clarity around how you view the nuance of repeat ordering and how it fits into the daily ordering behavior. Right? Again, all of this is hypothesis that I have at this point of time based on how I see customer behavior. Data, once launched, could show something very different. Likewise, if you do some data mining, maybe something else could come out as well. This is basis what I see intuitively as customer buying behavior, and therefore how we can shape behavior in that direction. Once you have had all of these initiatives, the question then becomes, how do we figure out which of these features should we pick? Which of them is most important to prioritize? Now, you can do a typical reach, impact, confidence, effort, score matrix, and from that, you do a typical stack rank. Now, while we could enter into an activity where we could do a prioritizing exercise together, it can be slightly messy. So I'm going to share how you go about it and probably pitfalls that people typically do in this. And that's probably what I want you to pay attention. Before that, I'm just going to probably try answering one or two questions. Saurabh is asking, how should we justify convenience feature to our stakeholders? Well, the premise of our entire business model is convenience. So I'm not sure why we would have to justify convenience. I think the larger narrative that we need to convince is the strategic period of going after perishables and how do we sell freshness and build experience around it. So I'm not sure why we would have to justify convenience. I'm trying to dig in a little deeper into the question. Other narrative would be if we have repeat users coming in and are fairly sticky, they would end up searching and bundling their baskets instead of us figuring out, right? True. But if you could do it on behalf of them, why would I do it in the first place? So my Instacart or Instamart behavior used to be that I used to go search for it and do the same sort of activities over a period of time. And more often than not, I have this 50 sort of vegetables that I order, let's say in a given 2-month time frame. But on a given day, I'm going to order maybe 10 out of those. Now, what Instamart has done is they've gone through that history repeatedly and they've said, these are the top 50 items that you anyway order. From that, choose what you would like. And if you can go to the next level and say that, well, historically, I've noticed that on Monday, Deepak, that this seems to be a Monday bundle, one-click ad. Why couldn't we do it? So these are things that we'll notice probably as we build the features and solutions out. Maybe on day one, we'll not be able to solve it, but we need to have that thought process, say this is the direction in which it could take. Now, coming back to this prioritization exercise, here's how I've done the prioritization. Now, don't focus too much on the scoring, but rather look at something interesting that I've done in terms of stack ranking. Now, this is where I'm going to open up the floor. First, for you to say, why have I done what I've done? Everything is as is when it comes to your rice scoring, right? But there are a couple of things that I've done differently in terms of stack ranking. And I want maybe one or two of you to share your observations as to why have I done stack ranking the way I've done? The usual approach, also to clarify, is most people will stack rank all of these initiatives together. For example, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There are about 17 initiatives. More often than not, we end up stack ranking 1 to 17. But I've not done that. Instead, I've done it for certain groups. Why do you think I've done that?
Can I maybe take a stab at it?
Absolutely. Go for it, Sherry.
It could be because the objective which we are deriving from these are different. Like what I'm trying to say is, like, for example, habit shift for perishables. It's like, as you were saying before also, right? It's just not a product side of thing, but it is also kind of the whole company-wide thing. So it will require more things to be resolved than coming to the, the ultimate solution. Probably that's why. Just my thought.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to probably read out a few comments that have come in as well. So Lokesh says they're all interdependent. Okay, I'll probably come to that in a bit. Probably because certain variables under AOV construct influence metrics under impulse drivers. All right, interesting point of view. Rashmi says, because we broke an AOV problem into 3 different problem statements. Shubhendu says, resource constraints. All right, I'll take one last. Kirtanasri, maybe if you can share your perspective, then I'll quickly go on to sharing.
Sure. So what I observe here is that the first bracket that you have given are proven points, right? Like that's observed across all products existing. And the second bracket, I think these are mostly marketing methods. And the third one is a shift in the strategy. So I think that is where you have, scored higher, and that has more value when it comes to shifting the mindset when it comes to making them purchase more perishables than top-ups.
Got it. Okay, then I'm just going to read out maybe 1 or 2 more. Naveen Raj says, is it because of UX UI problems? Akshay says, can be tackled independent of each other and can be measured independent of each other. All right, all interesting points. I'll read the one last comment that is coming now. Experimentation. We still at hypothesis stage and want to see which of them gives better outcomes. Millen says, big bets and quick bets going together. All right, great. Now I'll share it. Now, if you recall, I'll go back to the very first slide that we started off this conversation with here. These were our strategic pillars. We decided to go down 3 different tracks to attack the problem of AOV, because innovating on AOV, we've already seen proof, we've already made a lot of leeway, and therefore any incrementality that we do here allows us to quickly win battles in the war for AOV, right? Next, we have identified a new insight and we want to capitalize on leveraging snack. Now, we already know that snacking is a good behavior. People really are used to doing it. So we want to capitalize on it. So that's another big track that we want to focus on. We don't want to prioritize between snacking and AOV. We see that each of them in itself have merit to be attacked as independent problem statements so that AOV can be maximized. And lastly, again, we're taking a huge strategic bet in saying we want to shift goals. We want to shift our MTUs into daily, weekly purchasing. And if you were to think from another lens, each of this could be seen as a short-term, mid-term, long-term structural solve. So your innovating AOV is trying to identify incrementalities which can help you on the short term. So if you think of it from a roadmap point of view, you want to have wins consistently quarter on quarter over longer periods of time, not just today. So from that lens, you have a short-term win, which is coming in through your AOV innovation, through existing constructs. You then have a midterm to short-term win as well, which is coming through snacks, through impulse behavior. And then you have a larger structural solve, which can take many quarters, for which you want to start that work from today. So for those reasons, we are not prioritized between each of these initiatives, but only within each of these separate tracks, because we want to give emphasis to each of these tracks during the course of product development. Otherwise, what can happen is, it may so happen that our current beliefs, our scoring models, because a lot of this reach impact, I'll show you some examples of how RISE can fail you at times, right? It may over-index towards AOV constructs. So then what happens is your entire roadmap for 3-4 quarters is only filled with AOV constructs, and you're not doing anything for habit shifting, right? Because, well, from a RISE point of view, it just doesn't seem great, right? Or you could just over-index on impulse driver to ensure focus across all of these 3 strategic pillars, because each of these strategic pillars add towards different time horizons for delivering value. You're attacking them independently. So all of them need to be stack ranked separately. Now, there's another interesting thing that you will notice. So now that you've understood why I've stack ranked them independently, what else can you notice? Look very closely at the stack ranks and see what I've done. So I'll go back to the previous slide. Pay attention to this slide. Look at the slide very closely. Look at all the line items. And then look at this slide. So if need be, take a screenshot of this slide. I request everyone, take a screenshot of this slide, put it on a notepad. Now I'll switch to the next slide. Take a screenshot of this slide. Tell me what is different between the previous slide and the current slide. Okay, someone is saying ordering is different. Okay. Any other observations? Sorry, someone said something. Aishwarya says further narrowed down. Someone says, all right, Sabrish has identified it. I've removed premiumization. Why did I remove premiumization? And in that, if you notice, the option was social proof. So someone also, I think, mentioned social proof. So why do you think I removed social proof? We spent about a minute on this. Anyone has any thoughts? Why did I remove it? It's a very fairly obvious answer once I reveal it. But can anyone guess why? Not the strength of BlinkIt. Okay. That's an interesting answer. Any other answers? Maybe irrelevant to the target audience, not a product problem to solve, has to be from the customer end and not business ends. It's not something a PM can solve. All right, all of these are interesting answers. But the answer that I'm going to tell you is an absolute googly. The answer is because that solution is being solved by yet another solution which does the exact same thing in another category. So there's no point in trying to do the RISE for the same initiative, which reflects under 2 categories. So premiumization, nudges, or social proof. If you noticed, social proof is also a construct under nudges, which is coming under recommendations. So there's no point in you trying to score the same item twice. If it's coming under another category, it doesn't matter which of these they fall under, but it can be represented only once. So that way you're taking unique items. So yet another lesson when it comes to product prioritization. Typically when you have, this is one person coming up with a set of ideas. Now imagine what happens when there is an incredibly large team. Each of them are sitting and coming up with their own set of ideas. This sheet in itself will probably run to hundreds of line items. What then happens, usually more of that, is in the rush to do our prioritization, we'll prioritize everything. What we don't check for is duplicacy, because it's highly likely that when many people ideate, you will tend to have ideas which are very similar, the question then becomes, under whose bucket should it fall under? Now, that's a negotiation between stakeholders. In this case, mostly it's going to fall under the same team. So it really doesn't matter. You can say, hey, I'm attacking this problem statement either from an AOV construct point of view or from an impulse driver. So it doesn't matter where it resides. This problem can help. It's also a form of AOV construct. It's also a form of impulse driver. So that way, you're removing of duplicacies and you're having only unique line items in this. Now, that said, there's one last item that is a mystery. Sorry. Apologies for that. There is one.
You're figuring out a problem.
Sorry, yes,
CEO, इधर बड़ा chief roles देने में भी उनको.
So, Nikhil, are you speaking to us?
To exit.
All right, I guess Nikhil is not speaking to us. I'm just going to put him on mute. Right. So the question is, there's one more puzzle on this page. In this particular page, go through the line items. And there is something that I have done, which will seem rather counterintuitive. Why are scores varying a lot? Well, that's because of simple mathematics. I just multiplied it. So I'm not playing any bias here, hence the variation in scores. But for a moment, leave aside the scores. Let me ask you, just focus on the stack rank. What is looking odd in one of my stack ranks? One particular area. All right, I have not stack ranked some items. Good observation. What else have I done?
Manual.
Yes,
images.
I've not done ranking for manual. There's one other item. Look at the scores carefully. Look at each category's stack rank. Somewhere I have done something different. Hiteshwar has caught it. Supply has been ranked 5. Why am I doing that? So I'll explain first why manual has been ranked. Now, many of times the solutions that we typically do from an exercise point of view, right? More often than not also are mutually exclusive. If you do one, the other does not need to exist, right? So in this case, if I'm going down the path of Gen AI and that has lower effort and higher impact, why even spend time doing the manual part? So some of these ideas are mutually exclusive. In those cases, again, you can eliminate those. So again, whenever you do your solution project, there's a bunch of hygiene activities that you need to do to go through the list to see, hey, just because I've got a list, do I blindly start prioritizing and stack ranking? Or do I need to do some cleanup? Are there duplicacies? Are there mutually exclusive solutions as well? Now, the interesting point here is place where Hiteshwar has identified, saying that I have ranked demand forecasting as 5. Technically, it should have been 4 and action should have been 5. Why have I done this? Any guesses on why I'm doing this? It's easier to shift one versus the other. All right, that's an interesting point of view. Habit journey, okay, that's a point of view. Actions provide data for demand forecasting. Saurabh was saying, ideally first trying to get a good figure of demand before the demand forecasting happens. Beautiful. So the real reason is, again, whenever you do prioritization, one of the important nuances that we forget is many times initiatives, as much as they sound very exciting, need a precedence. They need a critical mass or a condition to be fulfilled before we start picking up those initiatives. So from a demand forecasting point of view, the score could be fantastic, but the necessary and sufficient condition is that A, there should be sufficient demand. Maybe the current demand forecasting models work till a certain threshold. So until and unless we know those nuances, if we just say, hey, demand forecasting is great, let's start working on it, you may preemptively be solving a problem which is not necessary at all. It's not to say it's not important. It's not a question of why, but when. And therefore, one of the gaps that people typically miss out when you do a large-scale prioritization exercise using, say, something like a RISE framework is to look at everything in a disjoint fashion. Everything that happens in this prioritization is contextual. It's contextual to the company, it's contextual to the stage, it's contextual to the life cycle, etc. So RISE at best probably says, well, what is the reach of this problem statement? What kind of an impact can you create? What kind of effort can you create? But how are we capturing precedence? Do we know that the preemptive conditions necessary and sufficient for it to exist has been fulfilled before we pick it up? So even though the store may stand good, it requires some judgment to come and say, all great, but the real precedence is unless and until these conditions are being fulfilled, it cannot be solved for. So we should pick it up at a later stage. So usually at some point, your RISE framework actually ends up being a lot more complex. So the other aspects that are not considered in this is effort has been largely more of the, and I brought this out in the previous part 1 discussion as well, is if you look at typical effort sizing, it's usually effort that comes in from my engineering team, my design team, etc. But there's a wide range of efforts that come in because of, let's say, cross-functional team dependency. For example, when I'm doing recommendations, it may be so that I'm the team implementing it, but I may require the central recommendations team to give me some of their bandwidth because it doesn't make any sense for me to be building this capability grounds up. I may require DL bandwidth, data science bandwidth. I may require ML bandwidth. I may require maybe some requirements from the data science team in terms of data pipelines to be put in front. So many times we miss out on the true effort required, and that's when effort can actually go for a toss. And I'll give you an example of that as we go further and deeper into this, right? There are a few other elements of prioritization, but I'll try to see if I can bring that narrative as we go further in, right? So the RISE framework is fairly straightforward. It's reach into impact into confidence divided by effort. Now this is one way of computing scores. You could replace reach, impact, confidence with any other meaningful set of variables which you think is ideal for the problem that you're solving for. The reason why companies take RISE as a framework is because ultimately any impact, if you think about it from a structural standpoint, is how many customers is affecting, which is answered by reach. For the person being affected, what kind of a lift, or for the population that is being affected, how much of a lift can we see? Is it a 1% improvement? Is it 10% improvement, etc.? To add in the factor of human judgment, because over a period of time, even though your reach and impact may sound mathematically good, you also bring in the ability to bring human judgment, to say that I've seen patterns in the past, and therefore, I think that I would assign greater weightage towards it. And lastly, you can put in effort. And therefore, Radhika, yes, your point is absolutely bang on. So the reason why I have only put in RISE is to show the gap in the model, to say that more often than not, if you just stick with the RISE as the top 4 variables upon which you are evaluating, you will end up missing on some of these nuances such as precedent. So your actual evaluation criteria will probably include a lot more other nuances such as precedence. Effort in itself could be broken down into compliance effort, marketing effort, operations effort, cross-functional team effort, right? Maybe if you're doing a build versus buy, sometimes many of the solutions you will not be building by yourself, you'll be buying as well. You'll be putting an effort for that. Maybe there's a financial requirement for it. That also counts towards effort. Maybe there's a team budget requirement as well, because the complexity could be very large, and that could make the way in which you think the problem different. So your actual prioritization levers possibly end up being a lot larger. For simplicity, many people choose RISE, but it in itself has limitations. And to highlight that limitation is why I showed this. It is not to say you should only do this. You should think about all the other levers that influence decision making, and then figure out a way to stack rank. Another methodology by which people typically tend to stack rank is one is to use an objective mechanism. Many times people largely rely on this stack rank in conjunction with saying, hey, for confidence, rather than it just being a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you give a finite budget to saying that everyone in the team has $100 which they can use, and they can then distribute the $100 effectively across all of this, so that I may feel that, well, I'm going to give 111 to everything, but $99 to one idea, which I think is supremely winner, because that's my product intuition at the end of the day. So there are different ways in which confidence as a score can also be evaluated. There is no one right method. What boils down is the judgment that as a team you feel is good. And over a period of time, you will build good judgment heuristics on what are effective stack ranking principles, right? So don't take this as the holy grail of prioritization. Understand its limitations and then use your judgment wisely to figure out the right levers, the right scoring mechanism, which fits into the context of your organization. Now, that said, we're now going to go to the last leg of this, which is to go deep into solutioning a particular solution, right? Before that, sorry, I forgot. Once you do this activity, the element that you follow up with is a roadmap where you take your P0s, P1s, P2s. Your number one stack rank goes into your nows. Your number two stack ranks go into your next, and everything which is beyond that gets pushed into your later. Now, it is not to say this this prioritization and roadmap is absolutely kosher. When you make this roadmap, usually more often than not, you will go to your stakeholders. They will question your ranking logic. They will question your prioritization. They'll question why and why not. They may bring in different points of views, and somewhere either it'll come down to objective feedback saying, no, here are reasons why your scoring is failing. Have you considered this? Or it could be very subjective and they say, no, for XYZ reasons, I need you to do this right now and push everything else on the roadmap. So that's a negotiation activity. It's not so much as what a roadmap structure looks like, but as much as how well you understand your stakeholders' thought process, how are you able to understand their reasoning, how much of an influence you have with them to finally come up with this roadmap. Once you do this roadmap, you'll typically start executing. And it's not to say this roadmap is final. As you start executing, you'll start learning things from the market, which may necessitate for you to change this roadmap. So be very flexible with the notion of a roadmap. A roadmap is just a guiding principle to say this is the potential direction to say. The best analogy for this is to say that when you book a cab from point A to point B, there is an initial path. But as you go down the path, there could be conditions and variables that change. For example, you may encounter a roadblock or a vehicle may have broken down, which you do not know while you are embarking. And that may necessitate for you to change a different path. So don't take roadmaps to be finite fixed elements. They are guiding principles. They're to give a sense of direction as to where to head and what's the order of sequencing. It may be so that once you implement some of these initiatives, you will learn something from the market, which may make the roadmap be completely different or some parts of the roadmap to be different. So be flexible about those nuances as well. Now we'll get into the last part, which is picking a feature and fleshing out. The reason why I'm emphasizing on fleshing out a feature is on two elements. One is typically when I see case studies that turn up at interviews or during the course of, let's say, an interview where someone is asking you to go into the details, more often than not, there are a lot of critical detailing that gets missed out. I'm trying to show you what a reasonable amount of good detailing looks like in a small interval of time. Your actual real world detailing when you're solving problems is going to be 10x more than what you see right now. But it is just to push you in the direction of thinking, what does good detailing look like? And what does good solution structuring look like? More often than not, most solutions are very abstract. They don't have a narrative. There's no way to connect why you're doing what. How do we logically make sense out of it? So I'm trying to give a structure as to how to think about solution building as well. So you've seen structuring when it comes to problem statements, solution structures when it comes to evaluating between strategies in terms of how to even think of solution space. We're going to feature level structuring of thought processes. Now, what we're going to pick up for the sake of illustration is contextual recommendation. This has nothing to do with the stack rank, but rather in terms of elements that I think I could showcase to where detailing could be done very, very well when you think about these kind of case studies, be it at a case study that comes as a take home or in an interview or while actually doing work in a company in itself, right? Now, the very first thing that I typically tend to do is anytime I try to structure a solution, I try to see if there are any real world analogies from which I can structure my mental models. Now, thankfully, contextual recommendations of a snack at checkout is something that has been happening for decades. It's not something new that I'm bringing up. It's just that that opportunity exists and it's not been done. So the question is, how do you bring this into the digital realm? So from that lens, I'm trying to use this mental model to say, okay, what can I look at this in the real world like? And from that, take out elements and see what are its components, right? So if you look at this, a checkout stores snack and beverages counter has a display element which says, hey, there are snacks and beverages here. Within that, so this is the entire display unit. So that therefore becomes a component for you. Within that, if you notice, there are subcategories. There are candies, there are mints, there are chocolates, etc. So therefore, that is another component. Okay, what are the subcategories that needs to be shown? If you notice, then within this in itself, there is a rank. There are some items which are kept in the first row. There are some items which are kept in the second row. There are some items kept in the third row, fourth row, fifth row, so on and so forth. So there is a natural order of ranking that goes into this product. And lastly, there needs to be enough availability of these items. For example, if there is just one item or there's no items, this entire thing fails. So you could have the ranks, you could have the display, but there's no item available. So at least prima facie, just looking at the physical world and taking an abstraction out of that, I can structure and say that, hey, the fundamental components of solution that goes into building out contextual recommendations. Anushka, are you saying something? Sorry, I'll have to mute Anushka. Right, so coming back, in terms of the component of solutions, if you look at it, then there are 4 broad systems that come. One is the display UX system. The question that we ask here then as a product manager is, how do we show the snacks and beverages at checkout to create impulse purchases? Then the selection comes in. What snacks and beverages should we show to a customer at checkout? Third, ranking. What should be the sequence in which we show the products? And lastly, availability. How do we ensure that there is availability? And what do we do if there is no availability? These are probably the 4 most essential set of questions that we are asking in order to solve the solution of having contextual recommendations of snacks and beverages at strategic touch points in the customer journey. With these set of questions, the questions that we then tend to ask is, okay, if we are to look at display as a problem statement, right? What does it constitute, right? Now, if you go through any product representation in BlinkIt or Instamart, you can broadly see that it consists of 3 things. It consists of text, it consists of a layout, and it consists of product representation. So these are the 3 things we need to be thinking about when we solve this problem statement, right? The reason why I'm getting into this nitty-gritty is each of these elements have very important questions that need to be answered in order for us to come up with good solutions. More often than not, when I see case studies that come, it's usually, hey, here's my final solution. Well, how did you come to that UX? What were the thought process you put behind it? What were the constraints behind it? There is no logical thinking process behind it. Therefore, it's essential to know how are you moving all the way from idea to a structure to the thought process, and therefore the essential set of questions that you're asking as a product manager, so that the final solution that you're actually showing as part of your case study or your thinking or even to your team members has essential thought processes identified, and there are meaningful answers coming out, which gives logical answers to why that is the right way of thinking about the solution. Now, when it comes to selection of beverages, there are 2 ways in which I can think about it. What happens if the customer has a history of snack and beverage purchases? And then what happens if there is no history of a purchase, never having purchased snacks and beverages? In that case, the question then comes, okay, what have been done historically when you have absence of data? Usually you have some kind of similarity models. You either try to find similar customers or similar items, and therefore find out items which fit in a very causal fashion towards snacks and beverages based on what is already in the basket, right? So these are recommendation techniques which are readily available, right? And we know there's proof to the pudding. So I'm using those as structures to say this is how you think about recommendations in the absence or a cold start problem statement. Now, the last or the third component of this is to say that there is a ranking problem as well, right? Once you have picked a certain set of categories, for example, you've realized that a customer likes biscuits, chocolates, and drinks. Well, between these, how do I rank items? Should I show more biscuits first? Should I do less biscuits? Should I do Coke first? Should I do chocolates first? What is the logic behind it, right? Now, here again, I'm relying on the fact that these are all data problems. So the question is, if there is data, how would I choose to attack this problem? If there is no data, how would I choose to approach this problem? If there's data, I would say that, okay, there is probably a precedence to say how many times this person has bought chocolates, how many times has this person bought biscuits, how many times has this person bought cake. So I can probably do some form of ranking based on absolute volume of purchase. If I were to push it one level deeper and say, well, there is context to it. I don't do this all the time. The behavior could change basis context. For example, during the night, the volume distribution could look very different. During the day, it could look different. So what if I bring in a time element towards this as well? It is not to say this is exhaustive, but it's to give a flavor of direction as to how you can think about variations in terms of ranking. One could be an absolute, one could be time-based. There could be other attributes as well, which, for example, I have not thought about, which you could identify, which could make ranking based on history to be way more effective. The question then comes to saying that if there is no data and it's a cold start problem, well, what can you do? There are customers who are similar. So could you show what is most popular among them? Could you show what is trending amongst them? Could you go one level deeper to show what is trending in your location, etc.? So you do this on a customer-based similarity. You could also do this on a basket-based similarity as well. So this is some of the mental models I'm using to say how I don't randomly say these are three ideas that I have, but there's a logical structure that's coming to say for ranking, when data is available, when data is not available. If data is available, what kind of data is available? If there's no data available, what are typical models used and what are the variants that I can think about in that direction? Lastly, comes the element of availability. Now, one of the essential or the first principles of retail is no matter what you make your promise, yes, if the item that you're selling is not available, this entire construct falls for a toss. For example, some of you have noticed that, let's say you go to Instamart and there are items being suggested. The item suggested, if you try to add to the cart, will suddenly say it's not available. Now, therein comes an interesting problem statement. How does this system be aware about inventory in the dark store? Because it's a negative experience for a customer if you think about it, that you show and you create the desire to say, oh, Deepak, would you like to buy chocolates? But I add the item to cart and then realize that, well, the item is not in cart, which is anyway a disappointment. So I'm going to think this is a broken feature. Secondly, I'm also going to start realizing as a business that this feature is failing only and only because I did not pay attention to availability. The question then comes that how does my central systems be aware about the inventory of the dark store or any dark store at any given point of time? Now, there are multiple models available to make a system aware. One is a batch update, which is to say, in a certain interval of time, I will poll the dark store and say, how many items do you have? I then update it to my server. Now, that has certain technical constraints in terms of scale, cost, and complexity of building. And then you have systems which say, as and when an item is sold, the inventory updates real-time system so that there is no lag between dark store inventory data and central inventory data, right? Now, this also has a complexity in terms of technical costs, technical speed of building, etc. So, but you want to evaluate these nuances and you don't want to rule out anything at this point of time. Once you do this activity, more often than not, the default habit is to say, let me get into fleshing out the details. But given that we are always in a race to build products and getting it out fast to market, a good hygiene check is to ask this question to say, has some format of this capability been built already that I can incrementally build or extend logically to solve my problem? Which means you don't have to always start building every problem at start. The reason why, again, I'm bringing out this nuance is it shows your preparedness to say that as a product manager, I'm not looking at every problem statement from ground zero. I am actually looking at it from the point of view saying that, hey, my goal is to solve the problem. And if there are capabilities available, I will leverage it. Only when the capability does not exist, I will then think about building newer capabilities. Otherwise, I am a prudent, pragmatic PM, and I'll try to figure out how best I can scaffold together 2 to 3 different products to get it out to market. And then over a period of time, I can perfect, right? So in this case, we know that capabilities for delivering text exist on the cart page. There is already a standard layout available on the cart page. You have the ability to render product images. There's a standard format for that. Because you're doing some form of recommendations, there's already some cohortization of similar customers in similar baskets. And because that capability of adding items to the cart and it is happening in real time through other recommendations is capable, you don't have to worry about it today. So that infrastructure is available. This means you can jump straight into the best possible model, which is real time, without having to go through the process of building a batch update system and then go to a real time system. Again, all of this is to show that as a PM, you're putting in the efforts to know what your current environment looks like before jumping headfirst into solutioning and saying, let me build everything grounds up. Now that is out of the way, you want to get into the detailings of the solution because you know what you can do, what capabilities exist. Now you want to go into the fleshing out of the details. As always, you always want to start with the customer front. So we're walking backwards from the customer. In this case, if we go to the cart page, this is what the UX looks like, right? At this point, as a PM, there are three important questions that I ask. Well, there is already a widget here, which is before you check out, which is a form of recommendations. Given this widget, where do we place it? If there is going to be a second widget, what is the priority between the two? Because they're conflicting for real estate. And what copy and design can I put given this constraint so that it catches my user attention? Now I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to open the floor for a little bit of questioning for you to say, given these three questions, what do you think I should do? What kind of questions should I ask as a next level so that I can build some confidence into how to think about solutioning or giving insights to my design and technical team as to how they should be thinking about this problem statement? Bear in mind at this point, in a case interview or as a case study for homework, you do this by yourself. But in reality, you'll do this with your engineering and design team as well, along with your analyst and marketing perhaps. So when you see this real estate and we have these three questions, what can I do to build confidence on how to answer these questions? Opening up the floor to you folks, what do you think I should ask to find out insights to make decisions here? Anyone wants to take a stab? All right, okay, since there's, okay. Prabhat is saying, discuss with teams if there are any learning from previous similar experiment. Okay. Why was the first widget built? Okay, all right. Any other suggestions? Hiteshwar,
Hi,
yes.
Deepak. I think where do we place it? Probably since it's an existing feature already, maybe I want to see that what is the efficiency of this feature previously? How many add-ons or has happened previously for this particular location. Maybe you can go for some A/B test results if that has happened previously, right? Priority of two different ASINs or I would say products can again be driven by if it's existing data, right? Existing customer, then what is the propensity or what is the past buying behavior for specific brands? You can categorize that way probably.
Got it.
Those are the
Super. All right. Shivam is saying placement, probably we should see where it is fitting into the user journey. All right. Payal is saying usage of existing widgets. Sabrish asking why was the first widget built? Well, the first widget was built for cross-selling. Again, an AOV construct in the first place. So that's the reason why it exists. Now the question is, given that this widget exists, how do we then go about figuring out where should this new widget come in? So Hiteshwar and Payal are on the right track here. What we want to understand.
Sorry, there's one more thing. We can ask how many people are scrolling beyond this fold.
Absolutely. So that's where we're getting to as well. So there are two parts to it, right? So before I jump into data, I'll go probably to the next level of product questions in itself, saying that, okay, should we embed into the same widget? Should this be another widget below it? Or is the current UX in itself not ideal? Or should we consider blending? These are some leading hypotheses on how to think about this problem statement, right? What data point could probably give us insight towards it? Here, the questions that I choose to ask are, well, what percentage of active cart page users who engage with a recommendation in every session? So that way I get to know that, okay, is this a widget that people are engaging every time, or is it only happening once in a while, etc.? Right? Likewise, is it that people who engage with the cart page then go to the offer? So if you scroll one level lower, there's another widget, which is the offer section. So are people engaging with that? And finally, do people really go all the way to the bottom? So what percentage of active cart page users who scroll to the bottom in every session? The reason why I'm emphasizing every session is to see that, is this a high action behavior, or is this only happening in certain conditions? If it's happening in certain conditions, this is where it becomes risky. For example, if you recall, as part of a prioritization, we had put this particular feature as high reach. Why did we put it as high reach? Because we thought that at the time of high level evaluation, well, everybody comes to the cart page, and cart is probably the highest intent page. So I think it's fairly safe to assume that everyone who comes to the cart page will have high intent usage. But we never dug into details of, will there be a problem if your widget goes into the second position, third position, fourth position? And therein comes the challenge of high level prioritization versus detailing out. More often than not, when you have 200, 300 line items, it becomes very, very difficult for you to get into the absolute nitty gritties, right? So teams have to build that skill to balance between breadth of accuracy, whereas depth, where you, so that, well, if I'm going to do it, I think one of the first constraints I need to be really, really considerate about is, while yes, 100% of people can be tackled when they come to the cart page, the page has drop-offs at various points. Therefore, I have to take a conservative estimate. And what is a conservative estimate? We'll have to say that, well, if I'm going to tackle at 2 to 3 positions, what has been the average response rates? So this is where you need to have that preemptive intelligence on how various nuances factor into impact reach. And that balance is what makes estimation and prioritization very difficult. And when badly done, prioritization tells a different story. Your actual impact tends to be something very different, and that leads to a lot of discord. So good teams over a period of time build better heuristics to make this converge over a period of time, right? Now I'm going to show you a hypothetical set of data, and I'm going to ask you, with this data, what kind of decisions should we take? So here is what the data, let's say, looks like. You realize that only 50% of active cart users reach the reco and actively engage with it. You realize that offers, only 30% of people actively engage with it. And then when it comes to the absolute bottom, sorry, I made a mistake with the last line. It's actually the number of people who reach the absolute bottom. Only 5% of people reach the end of the screen. With this data, what kind of judgment can we take? What kind of product decisions could we make? Any 1-2 people have a perspective on how we should be thinking about the design, the solution?
Further segment and see.
Okay, you could do a further segmentation. Sarath, what's your point of view?
Yep. So adding it at the bottom is of like not of proper use. So we should be trying to include it in the record section, I think. Might be like combining both.
All right. Sherry, I'll probably take yours last, and then I'll share my point of view as well here.
Yeah, so maybe one of the insights is that people are likely to click on recommendations more than offers. So they are more interested in what good of recommendations there are. So that's a good point, because we are also building something which is on their behavior. But yes, then I think Sharad already mentioned that placement should not be in the bottom. So maybe I'll just, jumble with these two.
Got it. So beautiful. When good data comes out like this, it becomes easier to make decisions. Sometimes data isn't as straightforward, right? So here, the set of questions that I ask is, well, given this data, we need to make a blended widget, because we realize that this is a critical point after which there is a drop-offs happening. So we need to figure out, how do we make both these features work together, right? And therein comes the question that somebody asked, but does this not conflict already with a successful feature? Fantastic point. That's what we're trying to work out. Is this incremental or is this detrimental? We don't know. That's the question we want to ask, right? Second, how do we represent, if we are to take this choice, from a UX standpoint, how do we represent both recos in the same widget? Okay, this is the question that you pass on to your design team saying, well, data suggests this, folks. And if you agree, how do we make this choice here? And then the tech decision comes in as well. Well, if we have to show both, what is the logic that governs this presentation? What comes first? What comes second? Is there a better way of representing? How do we solve for it? Right? Now, this is how I've chosen to, now, assuming I'm a designer, this is how I would have approached it, not to say this is best-in-class design, but this is just a hypothetical design, wherein you can create two tabs to represent it. You can have one tab which shows that, hey, you have yummy snacks and drinks that you can add to every purchase, and here you can show your reco widget. Now, the logic behind it could be based on your history of purchase. It could be the recommendation logics that we discuss in terms of similar users, similar baskets, most purchase item in my own basket historically, etc. All of these are models that need to be tried and tested. For a moment, we'll park that aside because each of those are experiments in itself. And then you have the second tab, which says that, hey, it supplants the reason to say that previously we noticed that people anyway saw benefit in being suggested items that you may have forgotten. We don't want to lose that benefit. Now comes an interesting question. Now, given this, how does the user journey then look like? So if you look, the user starts on the cart page. The first thing we check for is say that, hey, is the items available, first of all, for snacks and beverages? If yes, does the user select snacks and beverages as a tab, or they go to forgot as a tab? If they go to snacks and beverages, they add to cart and then they purchase. If they don't, they go to the other reco, add to cart and purchase. So this is what the high level journey then looks like with this user flow, right? Sorry, it should be moving. Before we go to the next set of important attributes, one essential question that we start asking, assuming that we have agreed on a particular type of recommendation model or whether the customer has data or not, we go through all of the capabilities that we have and we typically do a risk assessment of sorts. So that before we finalize on the solutions, we think through and say that, hey, are we sure we are not going to get blindsided in anything that we do? So in the case of display UX, perhaps the most important thing is, hey, is my choice of language really, really well thought through? Is my UX really supporting the copy that I have, right? Is the layout design that I have, is there some sense that I can get preemptively to know that this design model works? Reason being, more often than not, once you come to, let's say, this kind of a conclusion that this seems like the right design, one way is to jump straight into execution. The other is to say, well, we could have risks with this design. So can we do some kind of preemptive testing? For example, can I give it to some beta community of users to try it out, to get a sense of, do they understand the language, to understand what they mean, do they actually do the add to cart, or is it very confusing? Because it reduces the cost of development. And otherwise, you pushing it out to market and realizing, well, the design actually fundamentally bombed. Because this is at best a hypothesis of what could be a design. It's not to say this is best design. It not necessarily means that the customer has understood this design, right? So you would want to do a variety of these checks. You would want to do it for your data. You would want to do it for ranking. You want to see that, well, I think I could do ranking, but have I done some kind of data quality checks to see that all data is available for all the customers I'm looking at? Is there any spurious data that is coming in? Are there challenges that could be coming in from other teams? Now, the reason why, again, it becomes important to do this both at work and in your interviews is to showcase that you are planning for risk and not believing that everything that you do will work out. The biggest thing that kills product team from success is you think everything that you've thought about will work without thinking preemptively about risks. And if you spend a few more minutes thinking about risk, you can do a lot of activities as part of your product development cycle, which minimizes your GTM at the end of the day. So while I've not gone too deep, at least the notion of showing this is to make you aware that these are essential activities that you need to do before going into execution stage or saying, this is what we're going to do. This is the metrics for success. You want to think about risk first. After you do this exercise, you finally then get to have the freedom to come down to your metrics. In this case, if you notice, I've created 4 types of metrics. The first is first order behavioral metrics. The second is second order behavioral metrics. The third is first order business metrics. And the last is second order business metrics. And I'll explain to you why I have these classifications. First order behavioral metric is to say that, let me explain with this visual. When the user looks at this screen, there are a set of immediate things that happen. As a user, I see it. So that's the first behavior I have. It catches my attention. A proxy for that is impressions. It's not to say that means that I've noticed it. It's our interpretation of the user having seen it. The next most logical action that I can perform if I see it is to click on either the tab or click on add to cart, or I scroll. Any of this is a meaningful behavior action which says that, well, the user has seen it, he sees some value in it, and the ultimate value add is the user clicking the add to cart button. All of this becomes the micro funnel for this particular widget. So this is what we call as first order behavior, which is the effect that the feature directly elucidates on the user, right? The second order benefit of this is if I click on add to cart, ultimately I should proceed to payments or adding a payment if I'm a new user, right? If that does not happen, you know that while the behavior on the primary front was useful, for some reason, adding an item cart has made the user drop off the entire journey in itself. So that is detrimental, right? So you want to see first order behavioral benefit and second order behavior. If both these things are not understood, if you just only measure number of people who are added to cart or you directly measure business, you don't understand the funnel or the behaviors that are happening because of this particular feature, and you can't therefore dissect what went right, what went wrong. The third metric that we measure is business metrics, which is the immediate business metrics. So in this case, by virtue of me clicking order, what happens on the business side is I see an order transaction happening, which therefore results in absolute number of orders going up. I should therefore see an average order value going up should this be a successful journey. And therefore, I should see items per order going up. Now, if this were to be the case, I should also be cautious of measuring the second order business metrics, because sometimes while the immediate short-term metrics could be beneficial, the long-term metrics could be detrimental. It could be detrimental for good reasons, or it could be negative, but also a positive behavior. In this case, we specifically want to measure the long-term order trend and the retention rate. Why do we want to do that? So I'm now going to open up the floor again for questions. Why do you think I'm measuring specifically long-term order trends, or why am I interested in measuring retention rate? The first three seem now obvious, but why do I care about long-term order trends, or why do I care about retention rate?
Because our objective is to increase AOV for longer term, no? It's not like a shorter term.
But that's anyway reflected in your first order business metrics. You can see that directly.
That's true.
So I think probably a reflection of the quality of recommendations that we are generating.
That would also reflect directly in your orders, AOV. If the recommendations were bad, I would not click add. I would definitely not purchase, and therefore you'll definitely not see the orders.
To
As
factor in
in,
seasonal, sorry.
in the longitudinal manner, right? So maybe today
Also,
I may have a good recommendation, but yeah, tomorrow. Okay, but yeah, got it.
Anyway, your first order business metrics will capture it. Your first order
Yeah,
behavioral metrics will capture it.
To factor in seasonality or
Sorry, someone was saying seasonality. Who was that?
yeah, this is Ajit here. Yes.
Okay.
Seasonality or some events that's triggering it.
That could also be directly seen in your first order behavioral, second order behavioral, first order business metrics. Why then go to such pains to see second order business metrics?
To continue to check if AOV is the right problem to solve.
That if you do a long-term time series, you will find out as well. Sarath, then maybe Dia.
Company leaders will be concentrating only on retention rate and long-term orders. That's a major metric for them.
True, but we should also be worried about it. Why should we be worried about it? Forget leaders being worried about it. Why should we be worried about it?
Yeah, Deepak, as we are suggesting these items, we have to check whether these customers like these products. that we can get it from, like, if they order that particular item again and again, then we can see that long-term orders trends. And another thing is like retention rate. If there is any issue with that particular item that we are suggesting, then there is a issue, then there is a high chance that they might not come to the platform again.
That you can usually catch very fast with just looking at orders trend in itself, because you're looking at a particular category's behavior. Let's say you're suggesting for some reason, I don't know, a particular chocolate, right? If that chocolate as a product in itself has issues, you'll see conversion rate issues for it. So it is not going to be specific to AOV. You'll see it at a platform level. So again, why are we measuring long term? I'll take one last.
Are we, it's like, are we just checking what the short-term behavioral changes for that users? And when we are comparing with the long-term behavioral changes for the, whether it's getting old or not. That's why we are
What's
checking the
that
second.
mean? What does that mean? What is
Maybe
this
it
long-term
affects the
behavior?
growth of
Behavior?
users.
Long-term behavior means those people who would, let's say, for example, they have used that feature as of now, and they have done some actions on it. Whether they are doing that actions again and again, and continuously using the application for a long time, and being a loyal customer to, and whether they are changing to a loyal customer or not. So retention rate is the one which will give us that complete view, whether the people who is doing, whether the people who install the application being staying on the application for a long time or not.
Got it. Interesting point of view. That said, all of the first part of what you said, right, in terms of understanding usage behavior over a period of time, that can be understood simply by looking at a time series of your first order metrics. So you'll get to know usage rate, adoption rate, engagement rate over long periods to know whether or not the feature works, right? And yes, overall, for any feature that you typically mention, like any feature you build, you'll typically measure retention rate. But there's a specific reason I'm trying to measure retention rate here. It's for the reason that you mentioned, but an even more powerful, important reason.
Well, we can use it for like business thing where a particular product, if it's growing, we can use it for white labeling or those kind of developing the product itself, which can generate more profits in the long term.
That data you'll anyway get through volumes, right? You don't have to look at second order business metrics at all. You can simply look at every product's sell-through rate, volumes, etc., and make that inference to say what is the most popular category, what is the most popular product, and come up with your own white labels. Cool. A lot of interesting points. In the interest of time, I'll share why we're doing this. Now, to answer that question, we'll actually do a little bit of going back in time. If you recall, where is this? Sorry, I'm trying to find the slide. If you look at this customer journey, right? We're trying to get a customer to buy chocolates or snacks and beverages. Actually, the real slide we should be looking at is this insight slide. Sorry, you need to go a little back in time. If you look at this, people buy snacks rather impulsively, right? Now, if you technically think about it, I am actually, as a customer, I would have done a top up for snacks and beverages if this feature did not exist. What would have happened is, as a customer, I would have placed orders for, say, mangoes, cauliflowers, tomatoes, made that purchase, dropped off. Then maybe an hour later, I open up the app and say, oh man, I feel like eating a chocolate right now, and order it. This now accounts as a separate order. Now, this order could have happened today, or it can happen tomorrow as well. It could have happened in any interval of time. Now, because of this feature, you're now saying that, hey, you may be interested in buying a chocolate and therefore buy it. So there's a good chance that your actual number of orders may start dropping because this feature starts cannibalizing into the overall orders. So what was previously seen as two disjoint orders, because I'm doing a cross-sell for snacking and beverage, I make that order purchase right now. Therefore, that order which would have happened maybe 2 hours later or 1 day later is not happening. Therefore, your absolute number of orders may see a decrease. Secondly, if you are measuring retention, therefore, in terms of number of people who come on a certain interval of time, there's a good chance of cohort of people who don't therefore turn up because they have preemptively made this purchase earlier. So previously it used to happen at a later point of time. I've previously solved for that impulse earlier, therefore reducing. The reason why this becomes important is when you roll out this feature, one of you mentioned that leaders are measuring, top level metrics. Not just leaders, other business leaders, other product leaders are also measuring metrics. And if you launch out a feature which you did not know, causes orders to drop or your retention to drop, it can create panic and chaos within the organization. So good PMs, usually as a habit, sit and say that if I were to roll out what could be negative effects which are intended and they are not necessarily bad for business. So negative effects don't always mean bad for business. Sometimes, because the wallet is static in nature, I would have spent 100 rupees. I now previously spent 100 rupees and just spending 100 rupees later, it's now coming into this basket. So if someone was to look at the overall trends, I would be like, oh, damn, my orders are dropping, my retention rate is dropping, something has gone wrong. But as a PM, if you send out a message saying, if we were to do this, here could be potential reasons why we may say, it's not to say it will happen. There are potential reasons why it may drop. It makes everybody in the org aware that such a risk may happen. And if it does drop, it is because of this feature. And there is causal data pointing in that direction to say that, yes, this drop can be attributed to this. It is not anything else that we do not know about. So this is, again, part of good PM culture or good PM practices where you forecast any kind of metric risk and make yourself and the organization aware about what kind of second order effects that could happen, which is unintended or intended and is not necessarily a bad thing. And you preemptively, convince the stakeholders and leaders that this is fine. This is not a reason to break your head over. Let's go ahead with it. Because you do it, metrics drop. It's probably the best thing your feature is doing at this point of time. But surely because this metric is being tracked so well, people are going to, holy shit, we shouldn't be doing this, roll this back, and you're going to get under the bus. So think into the future, see how various business units will perceive metrics. How can it affect other business units? To give you another real world example that we faced. At Myntra, when we were pushing for ratings and reviews, one way of justifying it from a customer and saying, ratings reviews help customers buy more products, right? Because it builds trust. 10 people have bought it, 15 people have bought it, 50 people have bought it. And they'll be like, well, if 50 people have bought it, it gives me a reason to buy it. However, when we launched the feature, it actually resulted in a little bit of revenue loss for us. Now, there is a reason how we were able to preemptively convince the stakeholders. The reason why this will happen is if there is a large catalog of products which does not have ratings and reviews, or there are products which have been identified as bad. For example, I've gone and given a lot of 2-star ratings for a bunch of products and customers come and see that. I now am suddenly aware I shouldn't be buying this. So I was actually accruing revenue for a product which had fundamentally not been sold in the first place. So because ratings and reviews have become so prominent, what is going to happen is good products will get sold better, but bad products will not get sold. So now the net is, it's a question of what is the proportion of good products versus bad products. It so happened that in a certain category, certain bad products were higher, and therefore we started seeing revenue dip happening. Had we not known this behavior ahead and we did not forecast this risk, it was pretty obvious that the business teams would come down saying something has gone wrong. It is chaos. Turn back every single feature that was released in the last 2 weeks because we don't know what's going on. But because we knew this, we said it is going to be very likely that this behavior is going to happen. If it's happened, this is going to be the kind of products where it's going to happen. Therefore, you should not see it as a negative feature. What we should instead be doing is we should go to the next order of problem statement to say, why on earth are we having those sellers on our platform? What is the QC checks which are putting in place? And what are the product solves for that? So that is the part 2 of problem solving. So that then makes all stakeholders to feel a lot more convinced, because every company at the end of the day ultimately cares for revenue. If your revenue metrics start shaking, I kid you not, even the most confident leader at some point is going to shit his pants and we're like, something is going on, go back and fix it, right? It really requires a very rare type of leader who is vision-oriented and courageous, saying, this is part and parcel of building products. Here's the real reason why it happens, and I'm okay to let this revenue slide on the short term so that we do the right kind of products for the business and for the customers. So forecasting your business risks due to a feature is supremely critical. I'll just take Navin Raj's question because I have just one last slide before I wrap it up. Yes, Navin Raj.
So for products like which doesn't have any of the ratings and all, how you handle this? Because right now people, because of they don't have rating, people won't be buying it out, and they won't give the rating. It will be like the chicken and egg problem. How you will be handling that?
Correct. So those are interesting problems. We have to find out new ways in solving. In fact, I was thinking I'll actually take ratings and reviews as my next case study. So perhaps you'll have to wait as to how to think about that problem statement for my next session. But there are very interesting ways of thinking about this problem statement. This is all I can say at best right now. There's a lot of nuances we need to dig in to understand what is ratings and reviews, how do we represent it, why do people not rate and review, how do we solve the cold start problem, etc. So a lot of depth we need to get into. I don't think I can do justice in this particular call. So if it's okay with you, Naveen, we'll take this up in our next actual live case study. We'll take that as a big problem statement in itself.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Thank you.
Cool. The second last thing you do before you roll out a feature, again, I emphasize this for case studies, I emphasize this during interviews, I also emphasize this in actual work in itself, is go through your GTM checklist. Now, irrespective of whether you have answers for it, it's important to ask these questions to say, when I go to market, what are things that I need to be mindful about? So the first question is, okay, which cohort of customers am I targeting? Am I targeting for everyone? Am I targeting for a select set of people? Which geographies? Because say a company like BlinkIt operates in multiple geographies. Is there any risk in doing this across all geographies, or should I do a pilot only in Delhi? If I was to do it only in Delhi, should I do it for select dark stores? What is the pros and cons of that, right? Because I'm doing this feature, should I do any additional marketing? Should I do this marketing on social media? Should I do a big brand campaign around it? Are there any operational requirements on my dark store level, right? Should my dark team be aware about any changes that they need to do in their process, ways of work to facilitate this feature? Likewise, does my delivery personnel need to be aware about any changes? Do I need any financial approval? So there's a whole range of checklists that you typically go through. The goal here is to try to show exhaustively how you think about all the variables that can affect going to market and have some reasoning as to why you think you need to do some work around it or no work around it at all. The last part of it is experiment design. I think one of you was asking a particular question around it. Now, you have this conflicting situation, right? I have an existing feature. How do I know which feature works, right? So in this case, if you notice, you can think this as a 2x2 problem statement, right? One is a case where we introduce this feature and there are two tabs, and one where there is a positioning problem. One where SNB is the first position and forgot as the second position. And in that, there is also the nuance of active tab versus inactive tab. Now, this way, you're able to distribute traffic across all of this. And then you have your control variable as well, because that's your primary group in which you're checking. Now, some of you can say, hey, I would try to make this experiment a little more nuanced. What happens if I did not have even the forgot tab? So it's just a case where SNP is the default tab and there's no second tab in itself, which means there is a new variant, which is variant 5. In which case, you'll try to distribute traffic across all of these and try to run a A/B test. Now, it's not technically an A/B test. It's more like an A, B, C, D, E, F test of sorts, where equal traffic is being split across. That way, you get to understand the implications of what happens if, snacks and beverages is in the default position, and it is the default tab in position 1. What happens when forgot is in the unselected tab and it's in position 2? What happens if forgot is default tab in position 1? What happens when, say, snacks and beverages is in the unselected position 2? Each of this will have a bearing or an impact in terms of your first order behavioral metrics, your second order behavioral metrics, first order business metrics, and your second order business metrics. You will want to see which amongst this is the right permutation combination, which gives you incremental adds to the business. That then becomes the winning variant that you ship out to your customers. The other aspect that you would want to do as part of your experiment design is also figure out a rollout plan to say, in what sequence are you rolling out, or what percentages? So more often than not, a terrible practice is to roll it out to 100%, because no matter how much you do an integration test, no matter how much you do a usability test, there is a good chance that when you put it out to the real world, there are unknown unknowns that attack. And therefore, you will want to do a very slow control rollout. You'll do a 1%. And at that point, you'll first want to check, is my instrumentation working? I put so much effort into building my product, and for some reason, it so happens that my engineer forgot, or I as a PM forgot to follow up on it, or my QA forgot to test it. You roll it out, you roll it out 100% and then realize there's no data flowing through, this entire exercise has gone through a toss. So it means you have to go back, figure out another release window, get that sorted out, which is an absolute waste of time. So at your very first 1% rollout, you would want to check, is my data flowing through? In your 1% as well, you would want to probably do some early checks to say, is your system holding up? Are there scalability issues? Are there performance issues, etc.? And are your early set of users being able to use it? You then repeat this exercise at, say, 5%. You then roll it out to 25%, do the same test. And then finally, when you build confidence, you scale it out to 100%. If you scale it out too fast, there could be unknown unknowns that hit you. And at scale, because your feature is not operating in isolation, it could affect other things. For example, let's say for some reason, you thought that your real-time data system, which is giving you inventory information about your dark store, is actually ready for scale. But it was not well designed for scale. And you catch it at 5% or 25% because you're starting to see lag in data or you're seeing the feature break. If you did not know this, you'll roll it out 100%. People will come, use your feature, realize that inventory is not real time. They'll think it's a broken feature. So first day, great interest. Second day, people have realized it's a terrible product. Third day onwards, they see this feature and they're like, oh, this feature just doesn't work. So it's just, dead space. I'm not going to use it. So the next time you launch it, probably people will think this feature anyway doesn't work. So you get to check for a lot of other quality issues by doing this in a very controlled fashion. So this is the reason why you think through a lot about your experiment structure well in advance so that you know what is the true behavior measuring. There is usually more often, because someone has said that it's A, B or A cross B A/B testing, you only come up with control and variant. You can come up with as many variants. Probably the one caveat here is the more variants you have, the lesser the population size, and therefore the longer it'll take. So you have then a trade-off between how long it'll take, how nuanced you can get, and how much quality information that you get. So good experiment design is critical. So as a PM, you need to know the right balance between breadth of experimentation and depth of experimentation, the right sequence of experimentation. A follow-up to this activity is also that when you come up with these experiments and your primary metrics, you also would want to think about all the slices and dices of data that you want to see. Cohort level, geography level, device level, gender level, category level, etc. Because after doing all this, if you don't understand where does it work, which cohort does it work for, which cohort does it work for, you may end up seeing something not working and you don't know how to slice and dice it further. And then if you realize there's an instrumentation problem there, again, you have lost time in terms of figuring out what could be fixed preemptively. So these are called as good pre-mortem. So even before something ends up being dead, you start asking the question, why will this die? And ask all the hard questions. You look at your history of failures, you anticipate things that can go wrong, and preemptively make your design, engineering, analytics teams be prepared for it. Get all of that written, executed, tested for well before launch. And even at launch, you do it for 1 or 5% and get to see these insights coming through. And then you start saying, now is a good time to scale out because everything seems kosher for scale testing. And I don't have any blind sides towards data or quality of experiment design or other performance issues or other usability issues, which will make me lose time to getting to market. So with that, we finally come to the end of solution thinking. We have gone through a lot of nitty-gritty details of how to actually do detailed solutions. This is not to say this is the end of it. In fact, I'm just opening up the thought process of how much detailing goes into thinking of good solutioning. So now go back and just look at some of the case studies which are out there or some of the case studies you're doing and ask yourself, am I really, really getting into the nitty-gritties of solutioning? Am I really asking the hard questions? Or am I just jumping to solutions, jumping to top-level metrics, and I'm not critiquing, questioning, and asking the very hard questions that is necessary to make very high-quality products? Now, before we get to our Q&A, and I promise I will make sure I answer everyone's question, so no questions will be left unanswered. As much as I can answer, yes, there is going to be a recording. It's going to be on YouTube, so I will share the link for that again, and I'll share the link for this again. Before that, a humble request. Please, please, please do share your feedback with me. To make it super easy, I've made us a QR code. So all you have to do is take out your phone, open your camera, take a picture of it, and you can just go to a form and should take you no more than 2 to 3 minutes to give me feedback. It's really important for this feedback because one, you're investing a lot of time into this. So I want to make sure that I'm doing justice to you. So I need to also get better at my craft. As much as I build products, I'm doing this for the very first time, at least for a bunch of folks I've never worked with. So at least in organizations, I have different equipments, different tools, different contexts, which makes it easier to teach. Here, it's slightly difficult. So I'm trying my best to figure out new ways of making you folks learn. That said, like I said, it's far from perfection. So I would really, really take your feedback as to what went well, what could be done better. I'm sharing the link as well in case those who can't access it. Please do share your feedback. It would be super useful. Be honest. I can take good and bad feedback. I'm not shy to bad feedback only because I know those are areas that I need to do justice and I can do a better job. So would really, really love for some feedback from you folks. I'm also going to take a quick 1 minute break. I would request also you to take a quick 1 minute break just to hydrate. Then opening up the floor for all kind of questions. First, we'll start with questions with respect to this case study, and then happy to answer any other case study which you feel is important and I think I could answer as well. And also, thank you all. I think a lot of you folks have been staying back for an extra 47. We planned for 11 to 1, and it's good 47 minutes over. To see all of you folks staying back for this long is really, really heartwarming. It makes me want to do more such sessions, and actually, it makes me feel very energized and excited as well. So thank you so much. Don't worry, this entire video will be put up on YouTube, so you can go through this as many times as you want. Once you go through those videos, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn with questions. Feel free to drop comments as well on the videos, and I'll try to answer those questions as early as possible, as quickly as possible as well. Because those questions help me learn as well. Also, I also get to see what else can I do slightly differently to make certain points come out better. All righty. Hopefully, I've gotten the feedbacks in. So now, opening up the floor for Q&A. What works best in a Q&A session is when you raise your hands. That way, it becomes easier for me to just identify who the person is. Otherwise, there's just a lot of people asking questions, and it becomes a lot of crosstalk. So maybe I'll see in what sequence the questions have been asked, and then I'll just call out your name, and then you can probably just say your name and what your question is. So right now I see Shivan's hand having been raised. So Shivan, what is your question?
Yeah, hi Deepak. First of all, it was a very insightful session. Kudos to that. And so my question is regarding how much time it takes for you to come out with such a detailed case study for this. So, and ideally, from your experience and for people like who are sitting at senior PM level, they are doing case studies. So, how much idle time it should take to come to this kind of a detailed case study?
This is this is a very hard and unfair question to answer because, like you said, I've been doing this for quite some time. So a lot of this is what I would call is muscle memory that's just coming to work. So to be very transparent, for part 1 I spent 1 day. For part 2 I spent 1 day. But if you would ask me in my early days how long it would have taken me anywhere close to a week without me trying to do anything else, right? Because it takes a lot of time to even do research into speaking to customers and getting their point of views, right? Knowing where to even look for good quality secondary research. Domain knowledge plays such a huge role here that if you did not have any prior inkling on retail, it would be very hard to get to some kind of a meaningful sense of, hey, I know there's evidence about this and I can just leverage this to my advantage, right? The way to counter is not to wait for these kind of interviews and case studies, right? Because if you wait for these kind of opportunities to happen, you are doing preparation on the fly. So the counter, and therefore the way I've been training myself is, what is the essence of good product thinking, right? Structuring. how do I keep practicing structuring of problem statements day in and day out so that it's almost like you throw a ball at me and I know which direction it's going to come, I know how to catch it, right? How do I keep collecting dots so that I can connect the dots, which means I am voraciously consuming information about a wide range of industries that I care about. That in itself, I'm creating self-selection. I will never apply for a job or try to work for a company where I have zero knowledge of, because I'm setting myself up for failure against someone who even has 1% of chance better knowledge than I do. Therefore, I ask myself, where am I most likely to work? What are industries that excite me? And in that direction, I'm going to obsessively consume information, be it technology, be it industry knowledge, speaking to people and building patterns on how do people think in that industry, what they do, what work, what doesn't work, what are belief models that are changing. It's something that I need to do consistently over a period of time. Third, I need to consistently practice the art of storytelling. It is impossible for me to put this structure and narrative into place if I've never done this exercise. Because when you think about some things, it looks crystal clear. The day you write it out, you'll realize, oh man, slide A doesn't talk to slide B. Slide C seems so disconnected from slide A that anyone reads it will be like, these are three different slides. What do I make sense of? So how do I practice the art? So the best way to be prepared for any of these kind of circumstances in real life is to do preemptive preparation. Keep preparing every single day, every single week. It is hard work. It's the only way to become better than anybody else. I did not start off as a great PM. In fact, if I tell you the stories of how I've been a terrible PM, you will laugh. You'll probably, why on earth am I in this person's class in the first place at this point of time, right? But the one thing that I did do was I said, where and when everyone stops to learn, my differentiating factor is going to be I'm going to continue learning. I'm going to keep at it until I become better. It's that principle of 1.01 to the power 365. That's what I follow. So that would be my long answer towards it. So don't be harsh on yourself today, but know that you try to be better tomorrow than you are today. And if you keep doing that, you will be in that state of flow where any problem comes, you know how to structure it, you know how to frame it, you know where to search for information, you know how to put a narrative towards it, and make a fantastic presentation of it as well. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes. Thanks for the elaborated answer. It definitely answers my question. I hope, but definitely it answers for rest of the community as well, because it gives the right advice to us to cater the case studies that we come across in different interviews where we sometimes fail, so sometimes succeed. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Deep.
So in product management, I think the lesson that I've learned the hardest way is theory is easy. So you can practically go through the theories of product management in a week, and you'll probably know terms, product discovery, speak to customers. How do you speak to customers? That's the hardest part. How do you structure a problem? That's the hardest part, because every problem will throw you 10 different ways of thinking about it. So you'll have to try that structuring exercise over and over. You have to try speaking to customers over and over again. And in that practice, in that pressure, is where you start seeing connecting theory to reality and practicality, and then start building your own intuitions. So the theory of product management is like anyone can do product management, but doing good product management, which creates impact consistently without burning you out and without burning your team out, requires an inordinate amount of practice. I think there's recently this video, I think, of Rafa or one of these tennis players. Sorry, I don't follow tennis, but I just saw the video. It was very inspiring, where he was saying that when people watch me playing tennis, they say, oh, it's so effortless. You have no idea about the effort that I put in behind the scenes.
That was Federer.
Effortless. Federer, sorry, my bad.
Federer said that
Yeah,
in his
Federer's speech. Yeah.
Sorry,
in
I'm
the
so bad at
Dortmund
tennis. It's not a
college.
sport that I follow. But
Yeah,
that's the truth behind every craft. It's days, weeks, hours of obsessive hard work. It's just not you doing product once. I spend time not only building products at my company, that outside of the company, I think of ways of building products. Outside of the company, I critique products. Outside of the company, I research about products, which means if I have to be best in class, I have to sacrifice some things in life. And that's a necessary sacrifice to get to somewhat of a reasonable state, to be better than anybody else, because we're in a hyper-competitive market. The world belongs to, unfortunately, it's not about theoretical knowledge about people who can go deliver. So you have to really, really push the extra mile. I wish there was an easier way. And maybe when Neuralink comes in, it might happen. But until then, we still have to do the hard work.
Yeah. Thanks, Deepak.
Awesome. The next hand that I see raised up is Sherry. Sherry, over to you. What's your question?
So my question is more related to the case study, which
Mhm.
we did. So one thing where you talked about experimentation, right, in your last slide, how much time do you give in checking long-term metrics? Because you talked about first order and second order, both metrics, but sometimes you have this time constraint, etc., and you might not be able to really visualize the second order effects of your metrics because first order are like really visible. So how do you, in your in your work, how have you resolved this problem if you ever came across this?
This is a problem every PM comes across, and this is, I will say, this is not just a PM problem. This is a fight and a debate at a leadership level, because ultimately everyone is pressurized to show impact super fast.
Right. Yeah.
What goes counter to all of this is science and statistics. Unfortunately, you need a critical mass. So we call this as statistical significance. You need a critical mass of people to use the product over a reasonable period of time to see impact. The second nuance in conjunction to statistical significance is every metric in itself is what is called as sensitivity, which means to say, if let's say you have to put 1 unit of pressure, to what extent does the output change? Some metrics change a lot. Some metrics are very stubborn. You have to put in a lot of effort to change it, right? So that is the second problem. The third is the further away the effect is from the behavior. For example, behavioral metrics, because there's a large population of people coming in, the sample size builds up a lot faster. But retention, not everybody comes back for the second purchase, not everybody comes back for the fifth purchase, right?
Right.
That reduces the sample size level. So you put all of these three things together, you then have a situation where first order metrics easy to measure, long-term metrics hard to measure. So the way we try to do it is to say that so long as we're able to conclude on the behavioral and immediate business metrics, let's scale it out, but have a holdout group which is measuring long-term metrics. So for example, instead of scaling out to 99%, I'll probably scale out to 90% and have a 10% holdout group which measures for maybe 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and see how does it affect my long-term retention? How does it affect my average order value? How does it affect other metrics downstream? And then see if it's causal or not. So at least I can book my revenue impact and share it with my business saying, yes, we have seen immediate effect, but we still don't know the long-term business implications. So we need to give ourselves a time. So that's how you balance it out. That said, sometimes even your immediate business metrics may take time, which is why usually before you do this exercise as well, a good product management, and this in itself again is a very large topic. I call this as experimentation science. Like, how do you do good experimentation? How do you pick metrics? How do you understand the science of metrics, etc.? One of the key factors that you check for is to say that how much time will it take? Can I forecast that? So for that, we look at historical precedents to say that, okay, if revenue of a metric has been taken across a wide range of cohorts, population sizes, etc., if this is the population size and this is the categories we're operating on, what is the average lift? How long does it take for that lift? And what is the population time it accrues in the next N number of weeks, months? What is my traffic projection going to look like in the next N weeks? Therefore, can I get a rough sense of how long it's going to take to figure out whether revenue has seen an impact or not? So this is actually part of our GTM strategy. We actually do detailed studies on that as well. I didn't cover it because it's a slightly more detailed topic, but if you asked it, this is a very critical task that we do to ensure that we know how long it takes to actually measure a metric, and does business have the patience for it? And if business doesn't have the patience for it, what is the policy for it? How do I make judgment calls? If it were to take 6 months, well, I have to make some call. What kind of call can I take? And how do I safeguard myself against downside? Upsides are always great. It's the downside that makes life beautiful. So how do you then plan for downsides should things go down south?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. And thank you for taking the session also on a Saturday. It was really helpful.
You're welcome. All right. The next person that I see is Akshay.
Hi.
Yes, Akshay.
Hi. Firstly, thank you very much. It takes quite a bit of effort to do what you have done. So thank you very much. It's really helped me. What you said about practice, I'll just spend a minute. There's a guy called Paul Graham. He's probably a big investor or something like that. He
Yeah.
says that success has three parts. The first is talent.
Yeah.
The second one is trying really hard, which in pop culture is called the hustle, as we call it. And the third one is practice. Practice is very underrated, but I think it really helps. Yeah, get to my questions now. So the question that I have is the process that you have followed to arrive at to take us through is actually something that you yourself say is a part of your muscle memory. But people like us who are not from product don't have that in the muscle memory. So while we logically agree with you at each step, I am not sure if I am given the problem, I can replicate the process.
Understood. And
And that is what I tried to. I was the first person who spoke in this session. What I was trying to. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about myself also. I have spent 10 years in marketing and moved to product now.
Right.
So in marketing, I do have a muscle memory with a 3-line brief. I can figure how a campaign should be done.
Right.
But I would like to understand, take help from you and figure out the process. It will take my time to get me into the muscle memory. That is my job.
Right.
Clarity on the process is something that I still seek on the steps.
Understood. Now I understand your question a lot better. Sorry, the first time you mentioned it, I was not able to piece together where you were coming in from. Now that you've shared context, I understand what you mean by process, because process can mean different things. But now I understand what your definition meant.
The thought process.
The thought process, right?
Yeah. If I practice that thought process, it will become a part of my muscle memory, and that will take time. That is okay.
Fair point.
I need to figure that out.
So I'll do two things. One is, in this call in itself, I'll give you a high-level overview. The second thing I'll do is, because I do see there's a lot of folks who are passionate about product management, wanted to get into product management and ask the same question, but in slightly different ways as well. I'll share what does the product thinking journey look like end to end. For the sake of this particular answer, because there's a lot of depth involved in it, I'll just talk from very first principles, the top set of questions that we try to answer, right? That way, we will not get caught in the nitty-gritties. The nitty-gritties is where the practice comes in, but the high-level, right? It's not like saying because we've been talking about grocery purchase, it's not like saying if you want to cook food, the first thing is you need to know what to buy. Second thing, you need to go to a supermarket, buy it. Third thing, come back home and chop vegetables. Like it's like 2-3 block chunks, right? So I'm going to talk about 2-3 block chunks. Let's start with the very first question, right? To answer this, maybe we'll do a little fun activity as well, right? There are different products. For a moment, forget about consumer tech products, software products. Take any product, right? And because we're talking about food, chocolates, right? I think chocolate is a fairly common product which everyone uses. I'm making up this as we talk as well. So, the chocolate exists to serve a customer, correct? So it's a customer need. Deepak likes to eat chocolate for a variety of reasons. I'm sad, I'm bored, I want something tasty. So there is some intrinsic need, either said or unsaid, which makes me want to eat chocolates. Right? So someone has identified this, either by accident or somebody has made chocolates and they started seeing people eating chocolates. They're like, oh, it could be that someone went to a house party, someone made chocolates for the first time. Arey, this so seems like an obvious business. People are loving this. What if I make a business out of this? So you're observing somewhere that humans are doing some activity and realizing there is some need which is being fulfilled. And you're therefore saying, I come up with this product called as chocolates and I need to sell it to this individual. Now, what do you need to make this product? You need some infrastructure. You need some process. You need some mechanism to identify what kind of chocolates to make. How do you make this chocolate? Once you make that chocolate, so we call this as product development. What is the attributes of this chocolate is product definition. Should it be a long chocolate bar? Should it be a short chocolate bar? Should it have too much sugar? Should it have too little sugar? Should you put nuts into it? Should you put fruits into it? All of this is your product definition. Again, how do we know this? We're trying to understand consumer behavior. So the first block is, how do we understand a customer's need? This is the exact same principle that comes from marketing. So because you're talking marketing, technically, if you look at it, the world of product and marketing are actually joined at the hips. They actually came from the same field. It so happened that the process for product development changed, so it necessitated that product to be carved out. But the foundation principles of marketing is, who's my customer? What is his need? Right? That's the very first question we try to ask, right?
Yeah.
Now you'll ask, but Deepak, in this particular case study, you never started with the customer's pain point. Now that's an interesting point, right? Because not all problems start from the customer. Sometimes problems start from the business one.
This was a business problems.
Right? So
fair enough.
You can have problems coming in from the customer, or you'll have problems coming from the business. But more often than not, you'll always find a way to transform a business problem into a consumer problem so that you solve from the consumer lens and derive business value. So we want to understand customer needs and therefore the problems. The next step you want to do is you want to dig deeper understanding, why does this behavior exist, the root cause of this problem statement. One way is to say, I understood the problem prima facie and start getting into a solution. So let's say, for example, I'm hungry, give Deepak Maggie. Well, I don't like Maggie. Why do I not like Maggie? Because Deepak doesn't like processed food. Okay, why does Deepak not like processed food? Because Deepak cares about being healthy. Why does Deepak therefore, what does Deepak want to do? He wants to eat fresh food. So if you start realizing, then every customer has a need which is based on aspirations and limitations. I aspire to do some things, and there are some constraints in my life. Money could be a constraint, time could be a constraint, health could be a constraint. I have aspirations. Health could be an aspiration, how I look could be an aspiration, emotional satisfaction could be an aspiration. So it's between these two variables or vectors that you're trying to straddle and figure out what is that sweet spot of need that is being unmet. That requires for us to do customer investigation, speaking to customers. So, for example, in this particular case study, because we couldn't directly speak to customers, we looked at customer research and try to understand, why do people shop the way they do for top-ups? What is the macro behavior? So understanding the customer and the needs at a very, very deep level becomes the first big pillar. To do that, you need to have some structure. So that's where I introduced the concept called as logical trees. It is to say that I need to have some map on how to navigate this chaos. Otherwise, I will be like, okay, what's the first question that comes to my mind? Okay, Akshay, do you like this? Then I'll be like, okay, maybe I should look at that data point. So I'm going to probably go around in 10, 20 different circles, and I'm going to be wasting a lot of time. So I need some way to get a sense of the lay of the land and put some concrete structure. The method I choose to do is logical structure, say that almost every problem can be deconstructed into first principles or building blocks, right? For example, if you think of biryani can be deconstructed into rice, masala, the vegetables that you put in. If you're a non-vegetarian, the meat that you put in. It requires a kitchen, it requires equipment, it requires a certain amount of time, it requires someone to cook in. So you can break it down into its atomic components and then see how do they all work together and how do each of these things interplay to create the final outcome that we want. Which lever is important, which lever is not important. So for example, someone may want fresh biryani, but for someone who wants biryani but does not know how to cook and has 10 minutes of time, instant biryani then becomes a solution. Why? Because you understand that time is a constraint for them, cooking is a constraint for them, but the ingredients can be packaged, and for you understand technology, which brings me to the second part of this, right? Once you understand a problem statement, you prioritize the most important set of variables that really, really matter to solve for that unmet need, and then bring in creativity, which is to say, what are the various ways I can solve this problem? This requires for you to understand human behavior. This requires for you to understand the tools of the trade you're working. For example, a chef cannot do great cooking if he does not know how to use a knife, if he does not know the properties of fire, if he does not know the properties of the vessels that he's using in. So you need to get a very, very deep understanding of it. How do you do it? You play around with technology, you build technology, you fall down, you break a couple of things. It's not like the first time you learn how to cook, it looks like making even Maggie look simple. But the very first time you probably do it, you'll probably burn your Maggie because you do not know how to control the fire. Likewise, when you're building technology products as well, you need to get into the nitty-gritties of understanding how technology works. How creative can you get? So most of the time, people focus too much on technology consists of a database. Okay, great. But beyond that, you don't know what a database is. How does a database function? What are the various types of database? Why is there a real-time database? Why is there a batch processing database? Which use cases can it solve for? So you have to get into that level of detailing to understand how to use all of these tools to come up with an interesting set of solutions. Therein comes the second part of the problem statement. It's not good enough to come up with one solution. Why? Because more often than not, most products that you build will fail. Which is why if you look at marketing, the rate at which a product changes is rare. Coca-Cola is exactly the same. It was since 1885. You may have changed a little bit of the packaging, but what you're really focusing on is the marketing, which is how do you create top of mind awareness? You focus on distribution, because that's where you can create leverage, because the fundamental product works. Why do you want to change something which is not broken? But with software, you can change code in real time, which means even a 0.1% improvement of the product means money coming to the table. Why would I not use this capability? Also, customer behavior for some of these categories are changing so fast. Take music as an example. 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, or maybe 50 years ago, we were listening on a gramophone. From there, it went to a record player. From there, it went to a transistor radio. From there, it went to a tape recorder. Then it went to a portable Sony like Walkman. From there, it went into your laptops and desktops. From there, it went to hard drives. Then it went into the cloud. Then it went into Spotify. Certain categories have technology changing so soon that the fundamental behavior of consuming those products change extremely fast. So it becomes very, very important for you to have a very strong grasp of the nature of the category that you're dealing with and the underlying ingredients that make the foundation of that business work and how fast does it change. Some businesses change very fast, some businesses change very slow, right? How do you then think about solutions, pick up the best solutions and prioritize? Lastly, you have to deliver it. You have great ideas, you have great solutions. Ultimately, you can say the greatest chocolate is with cocoa, with milk, 40% milk, with X amount of sugar, maybe 10% of blueberries. But who's going to produce it? Somebody has to produce it. Somebody has to go through that thinking process. Now, in marketing, that problem is abstracted away because it goes to a production team, right?
Yes.
So manufacturing team, there is probably a food science team, etc. But in product management, that world is also squarely residing with us. You are responsible for working in engineering and design to make sure that that which has been defined goes into production. You have to work with them to understand what are the challenges. Because the biggest problem in this is, even to explain to you a chocolate, there's a good chance that what I explain to you as a chocolate, I will tell you something, you will interpret as something else. You will tell it to somebody else and they'll build something else. With software, with so many variables, I will tell you story A, person B will interpret it as something else. The last person who's actually developing will develop C. What you think versus what you wrote versus what you communicated versus what finally came out could be very different things. So somebody needs to be the guard who ensures that this communication goes full through. Over and above that, you need to think about 100 things that will go wrong. Unfortunately, in product management, most things do go wrong all the time. Especially in today's environment, your engineer tomorrow can say, hey, sorry, man, I'm leaving the company. Somebody else could be saying, dude, COVID has happened, I'm falling sick. Somebody else could be like, dude, I've not got a raise, so I'm not going to work very hard. There are so many variables that get in the way of product development. You are the champion responsible for delivering as well. So how can you think of all the risks that go towards making the product hold out? The last part of it is, this is a digital product. Now in marketing, that task is also sometimes maybe rolled out to a third-party agency who does marketing services to do NPS or market share studies. In this, your real-time telemetry exists. So you also play the role of a Nielsen and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to be measuring data and getting real-time information. Now, the beauty is, time between realization and changing is very short. Previously, you had to wait for maybe a couple of weeks to get that data. Then you need to synthesize that data. Then you need to go to the production team to change it. Now, you can learn things super fast and go and change the product also in real time. Which means the compression cycle makes you have to learn how to think about data. What are the various ways in which data will manifest? Get all of those things back, process it, synthesize, change your roadmap. So if you now think about the 4 pillars, how do you discover insights? How do you prioritize the learnings? How do you come up with solutions? How to prioritize the right solutions? How do you develop the solutions and launch it to the market? These are your 4 or 5 key pillars. Each of this has its own nuances, but if you start thinking these 3, 4, 5 vectors,
then you'll get
sorted.
it.
You're sorted.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
hopefully that
Thank you.
gives you a broad directional sense.
Yes. And as you said, product and marketing is joined at the hip. So management asks if product is developing a feature, it is product and marketing that have to jointly project the revenue, which overrides RISE. Management says, no, we don't want to listen to reach impact. You tell me how much money is product and marketing jointly going to deliver out of this. So yeah, that's a different problem altogether. But thank you.
Awesome. Glad
thank you very much.
Answer.
If I have something more to ask, I will just ping you on on LinkedIn. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Akshay. Next up, I see Dia. Dia, what is your question?
So when we were prioritizing the solution and
Dia, your voice is very faint. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, so over there, when we were trying to understand how the widget should be placed, and you shared a couple of data sets with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, this particular slide.
I think.
Yeah, it just passed. I think it's 122. This one.
Yeah.
Where the data sets were shared.
Sorry, I'm just trying to also find that.
Yeah.
I think it's
119.
Yeah.
119.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So over here, there are a couple of observations that we can make. Like as the scroll increases, maybe the visibility of the like even I wasn't aware, even using all these tools every day, that there's an offer widget as well. So maybe that could have been another interpretation, is something I was thinking. And because we are again as of now focusing on the smaller items, that is the average price of these items will continue to be under 200 or something. That means that even though my ticket size will increase, the number of items will also increase. So maybe again this entire widget that we have of before you check out will be pushed downwards. So I was just wondering that why hadn't we thought about it, and how do we solve for it?
It's a great question. Reason being, at this point of time, it contributes to a certain amount of revenue as well. So it causes incrementality, right? The chances are that if it gets pushed down, the efficacy may be reduced, right? So therein comes the trade-off. You're absolutely right. Should we consider that's why if you recall, as part of the 5th variant that I was talking out loud, and it's not there on the sheet, is to say that what if I actually just have the record of snacks and beverages as the first widget as a whole, and then below that, before you check out, what then happens? And you do the inverse as well. What if before you check out is the first widget and then you keep it? So these are all different interpretations. But right now, my intuition says that as you scroll down, the implications may reduce. So you may want to bring in both in the same level so that people don't miss out on it. So sometimes what happens is people are so used to using a particular product, they don't scroll below a particular depth because they've never seen value behind it. So for example, if I'm an active user of BlinkIt, and I know that before you check out, there is no incremental value information, I may have blindness to the areas behind it. So I'll say, sure, I'm not an offer guy. I really will never go check it there. So if you do put something there, there's a good chance that I'll never see it. To account for those kind of users, we're saying that we will have to put it at the same level and figure out how to balance the two. Does that make sense, Dia?
So the thing I'm trying to understand, what if we bring down the cart items and bring this entire widget where we're combining both of them? Why
Tell
is
me,
that not the case?
why do you think? So think about the jobs to be done on the cart page. Why are people coming to the cart page? What is the most important job on the cart?
To understand.
So in the case of this problem statement, we definitely want to increase AOV. But why did I come to the cart in the first place?
to understand what are the things that I've already added.
Right? So that is the primary job to do it. So we cannot make that a lesser priority. So that always has to be a higher priority because that's how information architecture works in the mind of the customer. I am coming to the cart page to check the items that I've added to my cart. So that has to be the first and foremost information that I see. Everything else aids towards that, either towards that or towards the business goals that we have. But that cannot ever be pushed down. Does that make logical sense?
Yeah, it does.
So it's like, for example, you go to, let's go to an offline store, right? You go to an offline store, you're getting your things built. And instead of showing you how much items are being purchased or what is there, they're simply saying, Madam, would you like to buy 2 more pieces of chocolate? You're like, but first tell me what's the bill. No, no, madam, first you tell me how many chocolates. You want to buy 2 more chocolates? No, no, madam, how about you buy 1 more cauliflower? You see how that works out in the real world?
Yeah, I was just wondering that maybe certain I have seen, because when I'm ordering from like Swiggy, they have deprioritized it, and over above they have other stances. So I was just trying to understand how we are paying
You
that
find
over
that
here.
as a very rare behavior for someone who comes to the cart page and not wants to know how much they're spending or what are the items that they're purchasing. It's like you throwing things into a black box of a cart in the real world and not knowing what's inside it. And then instead of that being the primary object where you have transparency, everything else being, would you like to buy more items? How about you buy more chocolates? I'm like, first tell me, what is the sum total of the items that I bought?
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much.
Put ourselves into the shoes of the customers, right? Yes, it's exciting to think from the world of business, but think how a customer thinks and what is the purpose of every single page, every single product. Everything has a specific definition, and then we try to extend it, but never can the core job be taken away. If you do that, then the customer's mental model goes for a toss.
Understood.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Next question. I see Sarath.
Yeah, hi Deepak sir. This is a great session. Actually, I have a doubt in the rollout plan. I can see you mentioned about 4 or 5 variants. Variant 1 and variant 2 is same, right? Or is there any different? I am not able to differentiate it.
So have a look and tell me what is it that you're interpreting, and then I'll try to see how I can help you understand.
So I understood that in the design you made a change. The 2 tabs should be simultaneously positioned.
So you now have the visual. Let's see this tab.
So the variant 1 shows that SNB is a default one, and variant 2 shows this another one. Forget one is the default. Sorry, not selected one.
Yeah. So let's zoom this. Yes, correct.
So this is like if variant 1 is given, then variant 2 is like automatically there, right?
Wait, let's go to what variant 2 is.
Yeah. The same case is for like variant 3 and variant 4.
Forgot as unselected with forgot. Great observation. I missed this out.
Okay.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Variant 2 is actually unnecessary because this is the same as variant 1. I was in my permutation combination created 4 variants, but in reality, that's not the case. So variant 1 and variant 2 are actually part of the same experiment. So the only thing that matters is actually what I probably meant was trying to interchange the positions. So then the other becomes active and the snacks and beverages become the inactive piece. So
okay,
then
understood. Yeah, that's my question, sir. Actually, I was not able to differentiate, so only I asked. Yeah,
fantastic.
Thank you.
See, I'm capable of making mistakes, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome, awesome, great, brilliant catch, sir. Thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, I think Akshay, is that you again with one more question? Okay. All righty. If there are no more questions, then I think we have come to the end of the day. Wow, we've spent time till 2:30. This is super, super fun. Thank you all for taking your time out again on a beautiful Saturday. I hope this was of value to you. Once again, if you've not got some time to share the feedback, please do share the feedback. It'll be super helpful for me. so that I can help you. That's the most important reason, right? Otherwise, for in itself or myself, it doesn't add value. But in order for me to do a better job, your feedback really, really helps you towards your goals, right? And we started at 11, we're at 2:30. That's some really solid time we've spent together as a team, diving into the depths of product management, right? From, thinking about the problem statement, going deep into it. Today, diving a lot more deeper into the strategic thinking about how to prioritize solutions, coming up with a solution space, going into the nitty-gritties of coming up with a detailed solutioning. So thank you all for taking your time out. It means a lot to see so many folks deeply interested, investing their time into improving their craft. Cannot make me any more happier. And looking forward to seeing you folks in the next session. This is recorded, so don't worry. I will be putting this up on YouTube. Perhaps not today, but by tomorrow, if not Monday, it'll definitely be out. Once it's out, as I've done the last time, I will share it as a comment in the events page in itself. I'll also post it on my page when I write a note on Monday. So that way you'll get to know about it. And if possible, those who are directly connected to me as well, I will try to send it out. If not, just stay tuned for Monday where I put the link for the YouTube video on the events page. Then you can go through it at any given point of time. My request to you is, try, now that you've seen the entire journey, again, try to solve this problem by yourself, see if there are different ways of thinking about it, and then try to compare and contrast with how I've done it. It's not to say this is the only way, but the goal is for you to push your product thinking and try to find different ways of thinking about problem solving, solutioning, prioritizing, getting into the nitty-gritties of details, and most importantly, thinking about the risks involved in building a product. So with that said, thank you. Have a fantastic Saturday and see you soon. Sorry. Yes, Karan, yeah.
So sorry. I'll just take 10 seconds to speak. Will that be okay?
Absolutely. No restrictions.
Okay. Just one small suggestion regarding the videos, because I shared the 4-hour content for session 1 to everyone who's trying to get better at their craft at product management. As you said, you need to be obsessive about the skill and just keep getting better and better by practicing. I think if we can break, we can surely upload this recorded session together, but if we can break it down into more consumable chunks, like 45-minute sessions, by breaking our case study down, where it's an AOV case study that has 7 segments that people can view. I think it will be easier from a consumability perspective, because honest feedback where I shared, and I was very passionate that this is easily the best session, where it was supposed to be a 2-hour session and we went on for 4.5 hours, and not for a single minute did I feel that I should be doing something else, because I felt that I'll be missing out on something. But I shared it to at least more than 12-15 people, but very few kind of from a metrics perspective were like, whoa, is it a 4-hour session? And that itself scared them off. So maybe for future usage, if we can break our case study down into more consumable chunks, it will be more helpful to other product enthusiasts.
Most definitely. Very, very valuable suggestion. In today's attention shortage fan, I think we need to entice people first with short content. And then it's like, if you want to watch a Christopher Nolan movie, first you have to show them a great teaser, right?
Exactly.
You can't say, come to the movie and I won't
Spot on.
And thank you, Karan, for bringing it, because in my circle also the same thing happened. Like it was just like a 4-hour was, though I watched this 4-hour together, but I think not all the people do, right? So it was a good suggestion, actually.
Fantastic. So, Shri and Karan, what I will do is, if I'm not wrong, YouTube today has the capability of creating chapters. So you can segment it. So the same video in itself can be broken down saying, this is topic A, this is topic B, this is topic C. So you can just double click and say, okay, I just want to see what does solution thinking look like, or what does strategic thinking look like? And it's probably about 5 minutes. And I'll try to find those kind of meaningful inflection points during the course, and try to make it into as small a condensable bite as possible, which is meaningful. So that way people can just sample different parts also, just to get a sense of, okay, this is what the content looks like. So action item on my side, I'm just learning the tricks and trade of YouTube as well, an unknown world for me. So give me some time. I will definitely get this done. All right. But thank you. That's a very
on your
valuable
journey
feedback.
with you, and really happy to learn tricks of trade. And one key thing that I take away from you, because I've been reading your LinkedIn post for like, 1.5 years, and I'm like, I need to start writing like this, or at least articulating like this. So I think you write so much that helps you to think clearly, which helps you to speak clearly. Something
Correct.
that I need to get better at as a product manager. So that is one learning that I take from you.
Most definitely. In fact, give you a short story. I used to struggle to speak in public. I used to have massive stage fright, right? And the way I was able to overcome it was my English teacher realized I had a good voice but no content and poor presence. So she's like, sound acha hai, but then there's nothing else good coming out of this guy. So we can start training him. There's some hope. So she used to ask me to write a lot. So she'd start by saying, start by giving a 1 minute elocution, right? So I used to go for a lot of elocution competitions. And the way she used to train me was to say that before you even learn to speak for 1 hour, can you speak coherently for 1 minute? So she'd give you topics, say, write for anything that you want to communicate under the sun, make sure that it's time capped to a minute and write about it. And then try speaking. And then try speaking about a topic without writing and see what works. So she would say extempore, talk about a topic. And I'll be like, yeah, sun rises. And she'll be like, see, because you don't know what you're going to talk about, you're trying to think in real time and you don't have coherence. So in order to speak first, you need to practice. What are you going to practice? You're going to start writing a 1 minute story. So she used to train me with 1 minute stories. So with that, I started practicing. I've been doing that consistently. So even today, whenever I introduce myself, like for example, one of the most commonly asked questions in an interview is, tell me a story about yourself. Most people think in real time what that story is. I have written that story and practiced it 100 times over. I've written 100 different variants for the same story. Where I'd say, if I have to tell the story in 5 minutes, what do I tell in the story? What do I not tell in the story? If I have 10 minutes to tell in the story, what do I tell in the story? What do I not tell? What are interesting ways of getting that person's attention? How do I remodel it? And I've practiced this story with so many people that I've now figured out, okay, if you ask the story, Deepak, tell me about yourself. I have a narrative ready made in mind. It's not like I'm thinking. It's like autopilot. You ask this question, you have an answer. Likewise, over a period of time, you start building patterns for a variety of things. So writing definitely helps. Start by writing very, very small things and practice with yourself. Find someone in your family who will be willing to listen to your monologues, if not yourself. Because when you talk to yourself, it sounds great. But thankfully today, with something like say a Zoom or a YouTube or a Google Hangout, you can record and play back and then listen to yourself. Oh my God, is that how I speak? So you could try that out, but you understand you better. Somebody else doesn't understand what you say, why you say, how you say. So it's always good to have an audience to just out. So build a community of people who you can practice this with as well over a period of time. That just amplifies the rate. So write, practice, speak, get a community, do this repeat, rinse cycle, and do this for anything but product. Do this for anything that you find fun. Eventually, this will work for product as well.
Right, for sure. Thank you so much. Really
Awesome,
solid.
awesome. Cool. Any other questions? Any other suggestions? Happy to hear that as well. All righty. If not anything else, I think it's time for a scrumptious lunch. I think our energies have been drained by a lot of brain thinking at this point of time. Okay, I see one question. Which tools do you use to make flowcharts? I use Keynote, which is the same as PowerPoint on Mac. I don't use anything fancier than that. It's not about the tools, it's how well you learn to use the tool. So pick any tool on the planet and just practice to get better at it. That's it. Don't worry too much about which tool looks good, which tool looks bad. Every tool is as good and bad as how you make of it. So pick a tool that you really like and just practice with it. You'll get better at it. That's it. Don't get obsessed with what tool does Deepak use. It really doesn't matter. Any other questions? Any other suggestions? All righty, folks. It's been a fantastic, fantastic Saturday. In the future, will you be running more sessions like this? Most definitely. So I'm trying to also score the internet to find out good problem statements. Maybe next time around, I'll try to find a slightly smaller problem so we can try to cover more ground and more depth in 2 hours and then have more time for Q&A. So yes, we'll definitely be doing more sessions, and every session that I do will be recorded when possible and put up on YouTube. Alrighty then. My hunger is starting to rise. I hope yours is too. Not hunger for knowledge, but hunger for food at this point of time. So fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Give yourself a big round of applause. You folks have been putting so much effort. I hope you have found this of value. Go back home, spend time, evaluate this content. You need to practice this a couple of times, and I'll find a more new case study to come up with. But give yourself a pat on the back, because you guys are the rock stars here who spend time more than 3.5 hours to make your craft good. You make your craft good, we get great products come out, everyone is happy. Mostly I'll be very happy because I don't have to deal with shitty products in life. All right. Thank you. Have a fantastic Saturday and a great weekend as well. All right. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.